Then, a crash. A coffee cup shattered. Staff dropped their tablets, and in the middle of the hallway, James Curry hit the floor. His hand clutched his chest, breath jagged, knees folding beneath him like wet paper. A man who once stood before world leaders and IPO panels now curled beside a smoothie bar, face ashen, body trembling. "Sir, Mr. Curry, get the AED, now." Chaos erupted. But not far off, a little girl stood frozen, Florence. "Welcome, my beautiful family, to another heartfelt moment here on Love and Twilight. This is your safe space with Dr. Phillips, where love, healing, and deep reflection meet. Before we dive in, I want to feel your presence. Type "I'm here" with you in the comments to let me know you're tuned in. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss a moment. Now, let's begin this journey together. Her pigtails bobbed slightly as she looked at her father. No movement, no joke, no wink. She didn't scream. She dropped her juice box and sprinted barefoot across the hallway. "Daddy," she yelled, slipping slightly on the smooth tiles. "Daddy, this isn't funny." Staff swarmed. A nurse dropped to her knees. 2 orderlies brought the crash cart. Florence tried to push through them. "I know CPR. I practiced on the unicorn at the spa. Move." She was lifted gently away as James's body convulsed once. Then, stillness. Nurse Nessie Hubbard had been reviewing patient charts when the emergency call echoed through the intercom. Code red, cardiac event, corridor 3. She didn't wait for backup. By the time she arrived, staff had James on a stretcher. The retreat's emergency doctor was shouting orders. Vitals, monitors, portable EKG. And then her eyes fell on the girl, Florence, clutching a half-wrapped stuffed unicorn like a shield. Eyes rimmed red, lips trembling, but refusing to cry. Nessie knelt. "Hey, baby," she said gently. "What's your name?" "Florence." "I'm not a baby," the little girl replied with a quiver. "Of course not." Nessie smiled. "That was brave, what you just did." Florence looked at her father being wheeled away. "I didn't do enough. I should have noticed. He was tired all the time and grumpy, and he didn't finish his toast this morning." Nessie didn't correct her. She just opened her arms. Florence stepped in, and in that moment, something shifted. Beeping. 4 drips. A ventilator hissed. James Curry lay motionless in a private recovery suite with floor-to-ceiling windows framing snow-covered pine trees. It was supposed to be a wellness retreat, a break from the boardroom, from algorithms and audits. But instead, he broke. Nessie stayed. She wasn't assigned to him, but Florence wouldn't leave her side. And Florence had more authority in the room than any director. So Nessie held her, fed her crackers, let her nap curled against her body like a kitten. She adjusted James's monitors in silence, brushed his sweaty forehead with a damp cloth, and hummed, softly, absent-mindedly, until a sound cut through the hush. A groan. James blinked. Blinding light. Something in his chest felt like a vice had been tightened and released. His mouth was dry. His ears rang. Then he heard it. "I told you, he snores like a grandma in a rocking chair," a tiny voice said. James slowly turned his head. Florence was perched in an oversized leather recliner, legs swinging. On the recliner sat a woman, curves wrapped in navy blue scrubs, long curls, tied back, caramel skin that glowed even under hospital lighting. And arms. Her arms were wrapped around Florence, who was busy eating crackers like nothing had happened. His heart monitor beeped louder. "Daddy's awake." Florence squealed, leaping from Nessie's lap and landing hard on the mattress beside him. "You were sleeping like a sloth on Saturday." He coughed. "Sloth on Saturday?" "She's been saying that all morning," the woman said with a quiet laugh, rising to her feet. "I'm Nurse Nessie. I was on shift when you were brought in." James looked at Florence, then back at her. "You were holding her?" "She insisted," Nessie replied. "Said you were too busy making money and dying, so she needed someone with hugs and a heartbeat." Florence nodded. "Also told her your feet smell like beef jerky." James closed his eyes. "I liked being unconscious better." Nessie smiled, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "She's quite the character. She got that from her mother," James murmured, then paused. "And the beef jerky part from me." Florence snorted. James blinked again. The pain in his chest was real. The weakness in his arms, the hollowness in his bones. But something else was blooming, something he hadn't felt in years. Not attraction, something lighter. Relief? Nessie adjusted the monitors. Your vitals stabilized overnight. We'll keep you under observation for another 48 hours. Sounds expensive, he muttered. She smiled. You own a jet. You'll be fine. Florence tugged Nessie's scrub top. Can she stay, Daddy? She tells better stories than you. And she shared her juice box. James looked at Nessie again. Eyes that didn't flinch. A presence that didn't beg for anything. Would you? He asked. Stay a little longer? Nessie hesitated. Florence answered for her. She's better than the bald guy who smelled like old soup. James covered his face again. We'll talk about judgment later. Nessie's laugh was full and round and honest. I'll stay, just until your next vitals check. As the sun dipped behind the snow-covered peaks, casting long golden streaks across the suite, James stared at the two girls in front of him, his daughter, loud and fearless, and the nurse whose warmth felt suspiciously like home. He had come here to rest, but something else had started waking up. The room smelled like eucalyptus and warm linen. James sat propped up in bed, the faint ache in his chest reminding him he was no longer indestructible. Outside, snow curled through the Alps like powdered sugar. Inside, Florence was dancing on the leather recliner like it was a stage, her dinosaur onesie flapping with each move. Nessie stood nearby, trying to scan vitals, but every time she leaned over, Florence shouted, Encore! Florence, let Nurse Nessie work. James groaned. She promised me crackers if I performed. A deal is a deal, Florence retorted. Nessie laughed. That was before you turned into a breakdancing kangaroo. Florence held out her palm. Cracker tax. Pay up. With a mock sigh, Nessie dug into her pocket and handed over a small wrapped packet. Last one. You've had 4. James watched them. Something in his chest twisted, but not the painful kind. This one pulsed with something. Tender. He'd been gone only a day. But Florence looked like she belonged more in Nessie's arms than his. You do this with all your patients? James asked. Nessie turned, eyebrows raised. Cracker bribes and dance shows? Only for VIPs under 4'3". Lucky her. Lucky me, Nessie said, her voice softer now. Florence climbed up beside James and whispered, She also told me broccoli helps your brain grow. Which is a lie. You eat broccoli and still forget stuff. I had a cardiac episode, flow, maybe from all the broccoli. James sighed. Can you stop slandering vegetables and give me a moment? Florence giggled and leaned into his side. Only if she stays. James turned to Nessie. Would you? She shrugged gently. I'm off duty in 30, but I could use the company. Florence lit up. Can we play that guess the animal sound game again? She's really bad at it. Nessie protested. Excuse you, I got platypus, right? Yeah, after 7 wrong tries. James shook his head, a chuckle escaping his lips. You've created a monster. Nessie smiled. She came pre-installed. A moment later, a spa therapist peeked in with warm towels and whispered, Mr. Curry, would you like your scheduled massage rescheduled or canceled? Florence gasped. He has massages scheduled. Daddy, you've been cheating on me with lavender oil. James raised both hands. I don't even remember agreeing to it. Nessie stepped forward. Cancel. He needs rest, and less judgment from tiny humans. Florence stuck out her tongue. Still watching you, Daddy. James leaned back as the room settled into quiet again. Florence was curled beside him, one hand in her crackers, the other stroking the unicorn plush like it was a cat. Nessie sat in the recliner, legs crossed, chart in hand, stylus tapping softly. So, he said, after a beat, how long have you worked here? 2 years, she replied. Before that, Boston General, big difference. Snow here's cleaner, she shrugged. People too. He nodded. You seem different. Nessie looked up. Different how? You didn't treat me like a billionaire when I woke up. That's because you looked like a tired dad with a wild daughter and a bad haircut. James burst into laughter. You noticed? It was the first diagnosis. He glanced at Florence. She likes you. She's easy to love. His eyes met hers. So are you. Nessie blinked. The air between them shifted. Florence burped loudly and said, Oops, I think the crackers expired. The tension snapped like a twig. James laughed until he coughed. Nessie got up instantly, placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. You okay? Yeah, he whispered. Just forgot what laughing felt like. Florence climbed down. I need to use the bathroom. Don't fall asleep and die while I'm gone. Noted, James said dryly. As the door clicked behind her, James turned to Nessie. About earlier. She looked up. You held her like she was yours. Nessie hesitated. She didn't want anyone else. Said I smelled like cinnamon and trust. James smirked. And you do smell like ginger tea. Compliment or cardiac confusion? Definitely both. They shared a smile. Florence returned moments later, dragging her unicorn by the tail. All clear. Nessie clapped. Well done, soldier. Do I get a sticker? I'm fresh out. But I can draw one on your hand later. Make it a ninja unicorn with laser eyes, Florence ordered. Nessie nodded solemnly. As you command, Captain Florence. James stared. It was like watching pieces fall into place, puzzle pieces he hadn't even realized were missing. He saw it clearly now. Nessie wasn't just a nurse. She was something else. He just didn't know what to call it yet. Later, as Florence napped curled up with a unicorn and one foot in James's armpit, Nessie gently lowered the lights. I should go, she whispered. James didn't want her to, but he didn't say it out loud. She'll ask for you when she wakes. Nessie paused at the door. Then I'll come back on second shift. He looked up. Promise? Her eyes held his. I keep mine. As the door closed, James stared at the ceiling. His body was healing. But something else had already started. Morning arrived on a bed of soft snowflakes brushing the windows of James's suite. The world outside was wrapped in white silence. Inside, it was far from quiet. Wake up, Daddy. Florence jumped on the bed, landing on his stomach with zero remorse. You promised we'd watch cartoons today. Don't pretend to be sick again. James groaned, shielding his face from her enthusiasm. I didn't promise. I mentioned it while sedated. Same thing. She shrugged, poking his cheek. You're already breaking vows and you're not even married. James peered through squinted eyes. Where do you get this attitude? She says it's genetic, came Nessie's voice from the doorway. She walked in holding a small breakfast tray, croissants, tea, and a bowl of diced fruit shaped into hearts. She wore fresh scrubs, this time in a forest green that somehow made her eyes even warmer. Florence turned to Nessie. He's lying. He said he'd do anything I wanted if I stopped crying, and I stopped. James mumbled. I was dying. You exploited me. Nessie smiled. That's some grade A negotiation from a preschooler. Florence puffed up. I'm basically your lawyer. Pay up. James sat up slowly, adjusting his pillows. Fine. What's the demand? Cartoons. Unlimited juice. And you stop snoring like a Saturday sloth. Nessie nearly dropped the tray as laughter escaped her lips. James winced. Again with the sloth. Florence explained. On Saturdays, you sleep like a bear mixed with a tractor. It's scary. But also kind of impressive. He gave Nessie a helpless look. I raised a menace. Nessie placed the tray on the side table. She's spirited. That's rare and beautiful. Florence blinked at her. You mean, I'm dramatic? Nessie winked. I mean, you're unforgettable. Florence nodded. I like that better. They settled into a quiet routine that morning. James sipped his tea. Florence watched cartoons with the unicorn tucked under her arm. Nessie updated his chart and adjusted the room lighting with a quick flick of her wrist. It wasn't loud. It wasn't even exciting. But it was perfect. Until Florence sniffed and announced loudly, Daddy's feet still smell like beef jerky. James choked on his tea. Are you serious right now? Nessie turned away quickly to hide her laugh, biting her lip. Confirmed yesterday, Florence added. I checked during nap time. Nap time? James narrowed his eyes. You sniffed me while I was unconscious? Florence shrugged. I'm an investigator. James groaned into his pillow. Nessie approached the bed and checked his pulse, still smiling. She's got imagination. She's got no filter, James replied. Florence looked up from her cartoon. Nessie, if you ever marry Daddy, can we make foot spray part of the vows? James pointed. Out. Both of you. Nessie giggled. Come on, Mr. Curry. He raised a hand. It's James. She paused. James, she corrected, softly. Their eyes held. Florence ruined the moment. Do I get to be the flower girl? James exhaled. I'm going to need therapy. Florence tossed popcorn in the air and caught it with her mouth. I am the therapy. Nessie leaned toward James, voice low and teasing. You'll survive. James tilted his head. Will I? The rest of the morning passed in waves of laughter, mild arguments about cartoon characters, and increasingly bold questions from Florence about what exactly people do when they're dating. Nessie deflected with grace. James suffered with dignity. At one point, Florence curled up beside Nessie on the recliner again. Do you sing all the time or just when Daddy's sick? Nessie paused. I used to sing a lot, not so much anymore. Why not? James looked over, curious too. Nessie hesitated. Because sometimes music reminds me of things I'm still healing from. Florence nodded wisely. That's why I don't eat peas. They remind me of the time I barfed in Paris. Silence. Then James and Nessie burst out laughing. Florence blinked. Why are adults so weird? Later that afternoon, a therapist came by for a post-collapse consultation. Florence stepped outside to investigate the snow for secrets. James watched Nessie silently as she organized his medication tray. You're good with her, he said. She's better with me, Nessie replied. He paused. You don't have kids? Her fingers slowed. No. Do you want any? She turned to him. Do you want more? James thought for a long moment. I never thought I'd want one after losing Florence's mom, but now? He looked at her carefully. I'm not sure if I want a child, or just more mornings like this. Nessie's lips parted slightly. I haven't felt this safe in years, he added. She didn't speak, but her hand brushed his shoulder. Light, intentional. He felt it everywhere. Florence burst through the door. I made a snow angel. It looks like a goat, but that's okay. Nessie turned, smiling. A goat angel? Now that's rare. James smiled too. You're going to need to frame that. Florence nodded. Only if you promise to stop dying randomly. James crossed his heart. I'll do my best. As evening approached, Florence insisted on staying over again. Just in case, she said, climbing onto the bed. Also, Nessie sings better at night. Nessie blushed. I thought you were watching cartoons during lullaby hour. I watch everything, Florence said ominously. James raised an eyebrow. Maybe you are my therapist. I told you. Lights dimmed. The suite grew quiet. James lay back. Florence nestled on his left. Nessie sat nearby, humming softly. Her voice was a balm. James watched her, heart heavy and full all at once. He knew this wasn't just a moment. This was the start of something he didn't want to lose. The hallways were dim, lit by wall sconces that cast soft amber shadows. Most guests at the Summit Well retreat had retired early. Snow continued to drift down outside the wide glass corridors like powdered dreams. Inside James's suite, it was warm, quiet, and unusually calm. Florence was tucked under a fluffy pink duvet, unicorn plush in one arm, a half-chewed cracker in the other. Her eyes fluttered closed, lips still moving as if reciting one last sentence in her sleep. James lay still, head tilted toward her, watching his daughter with a tenderness that nearly hurt. Nessie entered the room without a sound. She had changed into fresh scrubs, navy again, and her hair was now pulled into a low ponytail. In her hands she carried a clipboard, but her presence carried more warmth than paperwork ever could. She's out, James whispered. Nessie smiled. I saw her on the monitors earlier, kicked her leg twice. Might have been fighting off a dream villain, or protecting the crackers. Nessie walked over and gently adjusted Florence's blanket, her fingers barely brushing the girl's forehead. She asked me earlier to sing for her again. James's brows lifted. You sang? Nessie nodded. Lullabies. From my childhood. James leaned back slightly. She told me you sing like melted butter. Nessie chuckled. Her exact words were, she sings like butter that's been left out on purpose. James smirked. That's oddly poetic. She's oddly everything. Nessie checked James's vitals quickly, her movements efficient but tender. As she clicked the cuff around his wrist, James said, You don't just sing for anyone, do you? Nessie looked up, caught off guard. Excuse me? You sing for pediatric patients, for Florence. But not casually. She hesitated. No, not casually. Why not? Nacy returned the blood pressure cuff to its dock. Because music used to mean something else. James waited. Nacy sat beside the recliner. Her voice dropped a little. I trained to be a pianist. Almost went professional. His eyebrows raised. Seriously? Conservatory in Milan. Scholarships, showcases, spotlights. He blinked. So, what happened? Nacy glanced toward Florence, her voice turning gentle. My mother got sick. I moved back home to take care of her, and when she passed, I realized I didn't want to perform anymore. I wanted to help. So I applied to nursing school the following month. James stared at her, not with pity, but with awe. Do you regret it? Nacy shook her head. No, not for a second. That little girl right there fell asleep in my lap after 2 notes. That's more meaningful than applause. James exhaled slowly. You're dangerous, Nessie. She tilted her head. Dangerous. You make people feel things they've buried. Silence stretched between them. It wasn't awkward. It was charged. He sat forward slightly. Can I hear one? One what? A song. A lullaby. She laughed nervously. James, please. She looked into his eyes and, after a pause, gave in. Nessie stood slowly and walked to the window. The snow fell gently behind her as she began to sing. It wasn't loud. It wasn't rehearsed. It was raw and low, a lullaby in a dialect James didn't recognize but somehow understood. Florence stirred slightly, her mouth curling into a soft smile in her sleep. James didn't move. He felt the music settle into his bones, like medicine that didn't come in pills. When she finished, she turned around slowly. James blinked once. That didn't sound like butter. Nacy arched a brow. No. He shook his head. It sounded like grace. She blushed and sat back down. James swallowed, suddenly aware of how dry his throat was. You know, he said, I think you're the first person in years who's made this place feel like more than a retreat. Nessie glanced at him. What does it feel like now? James answered quietly, home. Florence snored softly in the background, kicking the blanket halfway off. Nacy adjusted it again without missing a beat. James asked, how do you do that? Do what? Make everything look so easy. She shrugged. It's not. I just try to make it feel easy for others. Their eyes held again. He leaned slightly forward. Do you ever get tired of being strong? She hesitated. Every day. And yet, you never show it. Because people like Florence need me to show up smiling. And people like me? Nacy replied quietly. People like you need someone who doesn't flinch when things fall apart. James's throat tightened. You're not like anyone I've ever met, he whispered. Neither are you, she replied, standing. That's why this is scary. James sat up straighter. Nacy. She turned away. I should finish my rounds. He stood. Wobbled slightly. Nacy caught him by the arm. What are you doing? I'm trying to hold on to a moment before it slips away. Her eyes searched his. You barely recovered. But I'm not broken anymore, he said, voice low. Not right now, Florence mumbled in her sleep. Batman, crackers. They both turned, stifling laughs. Nacy whispered, you need rest. James nodded, but didn't let go of her wrist. So do you. She gently eased her hand free. I'll be back, she promised. I'll be waiting, he replied. The clock read 2:14 a.m. James Curry had been wide awake since 1:02. He lay in bed, chest quiet but mind racing. The suite was dim, save for the faint glow of the city below and the soft moonlight casting long streaks across the glass windows. Outside, the snow had thickened. Inside, he could hear Florence breathing steadily from the recliner, her usual. Sprawl across the cushions, unicorn in a headlock, one sock missing. Then he heard it. The soft click of the door. Nessie, back on second shift. James pretended to be asleep for a few seconds longer, just to observe her. She moved like she belonged there. Quiet, assured, gentle. She placed her tablet on the side table, checked the monitors with a glance, and smiled at Florence before walking toward the bed. I know you're awake, she whispered. James cracked one eye open. Was trying to look peaceful. You looked like someone faking peaceful. He sat up. Busted. She smiled. Vitals check. I'm flattered you used me as an excuse to come back. Nessie raised an eyebrow. Excuse? Try necessity. You have the most dramatic heart in the building. I collapsed once, next to a smoothie bar. James winced. Must you always bring that up? She stepped closer, wrapping the cuff around his arm. Always. It's the most elite way I've ever seen someone faint. He chuckled, then went still. Her fingers brushed his wrist again. That same warmth, that same electricity. Your BP's looking better, she said, voice quieter now. I could have told you that. You're here. Nacy looked up, expression shifting just slightly. Florence snored softly in the corner. Nacy smiled. She's something. She's everything, James said. A beat passed. Then he added, I've raised her alone, for 4 years, and most of the time I think I'm doing okay. You're doing more than okay. But sometimes, I think I'm missing it. The parts where she just needs someone who isn't recovering from being exhausted all the time. Nacy's expression softened. You're allowed to be tired. I'm not allowed to collapse in front of her. Nacy sat on the edge of the bed. That's not weakness, James. That's being human. He looked at her. I forgot how to be that. She reached out, rested her hand on his. You didn't forget. You just stopped letting anyone close enough to notice. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Outside, wind swept across the mountains. Inside, something else was stirring. I haven't let anyone into this room, James said. Not really. Not since her mom. Nessie nodded. You don't have to explain, but I want to. She didn't interrupt. She died giving birth. I blamed the doctors. I blamed the hospital. I blamed myself. And every time Florence smiled, it reminded me what I almost didn't get to keep. Nacy's eyes shimmered. I'm so sorry. James stared ahead. I was just beginning to live again. Then I hit the floor, and when I woke up, his gaze landed on her. You were there. Nessie's voice came soft. I'm glad I was. Florence mumbled in her sleep. Batman would have caught you. They both blinked. James whispered, She's not wrong. Nacy stifled a laugh. That girl is tuned into another dimension. I swear she does this on purpose. Florence rolled over and mumbled again, You owe Batman a smoothie. James whispered, This is not normal. Nacy leaned back and giggled. She's magical. James turned serious again. When I saw her asleep in your lap, I thought I'd missed something big, something permanent. She looked like she'd already chosen you. Nessie didn't blink. And you? I didn't have a choice. She stared at him. He didn't flinch. I mean it, he said, voice thick. You walked in with crackers and a lullaby, and suddenly everything that was broken stopped rattling. Nacy looked away. He reached for her hand. I'm not asking for answers. I'm just asking if this, whatever it is real for you too. She exhaled. James. He waited. I've never let myself fall for a patient. Ever? He nodded slowly. But you're not just a patient. You're a father. A man trying his best. A human being who looked half dead and still found a way to crack jokes. And, Nacy smiled faintly. And your daughter thinks I'm part of the family already. James brushed her knuckles with his thumb. Maybe she knows something we don't. Florence sat up suddenly, eyes still half closed. I knew it. They both jumped. Florence pointed at Nessie. You're gonna be my mom now. I had a dream, and also I heard everything. James groaned. We need soundproof walls. Nacy laughed softly. Come here, Flo. Florence walked over like a queen with a mission. She crawled between them, laid her head on Nacy's lap, and yawned. I'm staying here, for security reasons. Nacy looked at James. Security reasons? She's worried I'll collapse again, he muttered. Florence corrected him. I'm worried he'll say something weird and scare you off. They all laughed quietly. But as Florence drifted back to sleep, head in Nessie's lap, hand gripping her scrub top, James whispered across the girl's tiny body. Don't go, Nessie. Not just from the room. From us. Nessie stared at him for a long moment. I'm still figuring it out, she said honestly. That's fine, James replied. Just don't figure it out alone. Morning broke slow and silver over the Alps. Snow clung to the windows like lace, softening the light that spilled into the room. James opened his eyes to the soft sound of humming, low, melodic, and close. Nacy was seated beside the bed, still in her scrubs from the night shift. Florence curled up across her lap, like she had grown roots there. One arm of the child was slung over Nessie's waist. The other gripped her unicorn plush with military precision. James cleared his throat softly. Nessie looked up. "You didn't leave." "I said I wouldn't," she replied. His voice was groggy. "That's rare." Nessie smiled faintly. "So is trust." James adjusted his pillow and stared at her. No makeup, no performance, just eyes that understood more than most ever dared to ask. Did she sleep through? She kicked twice, called me Mom Nessie in her sleep, and drooled in the exact shape of the state of Texas. James laughed quietly. "That tracks." Nessie gently adjusted Florence's blanket. "She's the kind of child who makes you want to be better." "She made me slow down," James admitted. "Now she's making me notice things, like how beautiful this moment is." Nessie looked away, but not before he saw the flush in her cheeks. After Florence shifted and curled tighter into Nessie's side, James reached out slowly, brushing his fingers along Nessie's wrist. "I meant what I said last night." She glanced down at his hand but didn't move. "I don't want you to go through life thinking you're just the one who shows up to heal people and leaves before they look too closely." Her gaze lifted. "What do you see when you look closely?" James answered instantly. "A woman who's held more than her share of brokenness, and somehow still carries warmth like it's renewable." Nessie swallowed. "You're not making this easy." "I'm not trying to," he said softly. "I'm trying to be honest." She stood slowly, lowering Florence gently to the mattress. "I need air," she whispered. James watched her walk to the window, arms folded over her chest. He followed. The snow was still falling outside, but inside, the tension hummed like electricity caught between fingers not yet touching. He moved beside her, their shoulders almost brushing. "Nessie." She turned slightly, eyes cautious but open. "I haven't felt alive in a long time. Not fully, not since everything. But these last few days, Florence laughing, your voice in the dark, you looking at me like I'm more than a checklist on a chart." "You are," she said quietly. "I want to feel that every day. With you." She didn't reply immediately. Instead, she reached up and gently touched the spot just above his heart. His breath hitched. "You're healing," she murmured, "but that doesn't mean you're ready." "I'm not asking for promises," James replied. "I'm asking for the chance to choose you every day." In real time, Nessie's eyes closed for a beat. Then she opened them, looked into his, and stepped forward. Their hands found each other, fingers tangled like they'd done this in another lifetime. No rush, no desperation, just the quiet ache of two people who finally saw each other and didn't want to blink. Then she said, almost inaudibly, "If I fall into this, I need to know I won't be someone you only remember when your heart hurts." James leaned in, lips inches from her temple. "You'll be the reason it stays beating." Suddenly, Florence let out a dramatic sigh from the bed. "Ugh. Are you guys being romantic again?" They froze. Florence sat up, hair wild, unicorn clutched like a sword. "I can feel it. My sixth sense is gross adult feelings." Nessie coughed into her hand, stepping back. James turned to Florence. "What happened to you being asleep for 2 more hours?" "I dreamed you were giving her googly eyes again. So I woke up to protect her." "Protect her?" Florence crossed her arms. "You're dramatic. She deserves waffles before declarations." James looked at Nessie. "Did I raise her, or was she sent from space?" Nessie grinned. "Hard to say. She's not of this earth." Florence stood on the bed, hands on hips. "If you want to impress her, Daddy, you need to brush your teeth and offer waffles, and maybe wear cologne." James laughed. "You really are my therapist." Later that morning, the three of them sat around a small table in the suite. Waffles with strawberries, orange juice. Florence wearing a pink tiara. She insisted Nessie gifted her telepathically. James sat beside Nessie, their knees brushing every so often. It felt natural. No fanfare, no forced smiles. Just something quietly forming, a bond being layered, moment by moment. James leaned in and whispered, "You're dangerous, Nurse Nessie." She turned, brow raised. "There it is again. You make it too easy to imagine forever." She didn't smile. She looked at him. And then, very slowly, she replied, "Then stop imagining it, and start building it." It was barely 7 a.m., but Florence had declared the day jungle pajama day and refused to wear anything that didn't have cartoon monkeys on it. James sat in a lounge chair near the large window, wrapped in a soft cotton robe with a fresh mug of tea. His legs were covered in a plush throw. The heart monitor had been removed the night before, and for the first time in days he felt like himself. Sort of. Not quite the CEO version, but not the half-dead smoothie bar casualty either. Somewhere in between, the space where fathers rediscover life through spilled juice, stolen, snuggles, and women who sang lullabies that rearranged your soul. Florence danced through the room with her jungle pajamas flapping, sipping. From her personalized pink juice box that said Queen of Questions, Nisi entered with a tray of eggs and toast and blinked at the scene. "Am I late to the jungle parade?" Florence nodded. "We've already named all the animals. Daddy is the sleepy lion. I'm the banana detective. You're the magical snack fairy." Nisi laughed. "Do I get wings?" "No," Florence replied. "Just crackers." James raised his mug. "She's promoted you. You should feel honored." "I do," Nessie said, setting the tray on the table. "Any magical snack fairy who survives banana detective interrogation earns her badge." They sat for breakfast, the kind that came with soft conversation and soft eyes. Florence insisted that they all eat while discussing the mystery of missing sock number 2. "I had 2, she said with dramatic flair. "Now I have one. Either Daddy stole it to use as a tea cozy or the unicorn's hiding secrets." Nisi pretended to take notes. "Was there a motive?" James replied dryly. "You kicked your other sock into the juice cooler yesterday while reenacting Frozen." Florence gasped. "That was a different sock." Nisi coughed into her napkin, laughing. James leaned toward her. "This is what most mornings look like. If you're wondering—" "I'm not wondering," she whispered. "I'm loving it." After breakfast, they moved to the conservatory attached to the suite, a sunlit room, with tall glass walls and a floor covered in faux grass mats and scattered pillows. Florence flopped down and stretched dramatically. "This is my yoga zone. Nisi, do your breathing thing." Nisi glanced at James. "My breathing thing?" "She means guided stretches," James said. Florence added, with jokes or "I won't participate." Nisi stood at the front like a teacher and clasped her hands together. "All right." Big breath in. Florence inhaled. "Why did the duck get kicked out of class?" James raised an eyebrow. "Do I want to know?" "Because he was a quack-up," Florence shouted before exhaling. Nessie clapped. "Certified comedy ninja." Florence beamed. They moved through simple stretches, James participating from his chair. Nisi showed Florence how to hug her knees like a sleepy kitten, and then made up a new move called the Cracker Crunch, which involved twisting like you were reaching for snacks behind you. Every time Nisi demonstrated a move, James watched her. The graceful lines of her arms, the way her laughter never felt forced, and the way Florence looked at her like she'd invented joy. He realized something terrifying. He didn't just want to kiss her. He wanted to wake up to this every day. Later, as Florence colored unicorns with crowns on the floor, Nisi sat beside James on the window bench. The sun warmed the space between them, but James noticed how close her knee was to his. She was sipping peppermint tea, and he could smell it mixed with the scent of her skin, clean linen and ginger. "You're really good with her," James said quietly. Nisi replied without looking at him. "She makes it easy. Not everyone would say that." She finally turned. "Not everyone sees her the way you do." He held her gaze. "Not everyone sees you the way I do." Nessie looked down. "James, I'm not rushing anything," he said, "but I need you to know, these mornings, they've already changed me." She leaned back slightly. "You think it's because I'm different. I know you are." Nessie's voice dropped. "I think I'm scared of what this could mean." "Why?" "Because what if it's only soft now and hard later?" James didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached for her hand again, fingers warm against her palm. Florence cleared her throat loudly. "Are you two holding hands?" James replied. "We're having a grown-up talk." Florence stood. "Well, as your emotional supervisor, I say proceed cautiously." Nessie snorted. "Supervisor?" James grinned. "She gave herself that title 2 days ago." Florence nodded proudly. "And I have a badge. It's invisible but powerful." Nessie smiled, then leaned against James just slightly. "I'll take the warning. But I'm staying." As the sun climbed higher, Nessie gathered her things. Her shift had ended 2 hours ago, but she hadn't moved. James walked her to the hallway, Florence trotting beside them. At the door, Niecy knelt to Florence's level. Same time tomorrow? Florence nodded. Bring extra crackers. Niecy rose. James followed her just outside the suite. They stood in silence. Then James said softly, "Thank you for giving us today." Nessie looked up. "Thank you for letting me want tomorrow." James leaned forward, just slightly, enough that the space between them thinned. And if Florence hadn't shouted, "Wait, I forgot to hug you," from behind the door, they might have kissed. The suite was dim. Florence had long since passed out on the couch, mouth open, one foot on. The coffee table, the unicorn now wearing her jungle pajamas as a cape. The television played soft end credits to a cartoon marathon neither James nor Niecy had really been watching. They sat together in the recliner, the same one where she'd held Florence that first night. Only now, there was no distance between them. No laughter buffering the tension. No distractions. Just the soft hum of the heater, the slow rhythm of two people trying very hard not to fall, any faster than they already had. James turned his head slightly. Niecy hadn't moved in minutes. She was sitting cross-legged, her hand resting just a breath away from his on the armrest. "She didn't ask for a bedtime story tonight," he murmured. "She didn't need one," Niecy replied, voice low. "You gave her one all day." James smiled faintly. "Do you do this often?" "What?" "Make things lighter just by existing." Niecy chuckled. "I wish." "I'm serious," James said, shifting to face her more fully. "Before you walked into that emergency room, I was just surviving. And now, I don't feel dead inside anymore." She didn't speak. Instead, she slowly reached over and brushed a lock of hair away from his forehead. "You scared her," she said softly. "I scared myself." Nessie looked at him carefully. "Do you know how lucky you are?" He nodded. "I've got a daughter who forces me to eat better and a nurse who brings crackers and cracks my walls." She gave him a look. "You know what I mean." James looked down. "I've been through a lot, but I don't wear it well. I built success on top of grief. That doesn't make it gone." "You've been grieving while raising joy," she whispered. "That's not weakness. That's resilience." He looked at her. Really looked. And something inside him shifted. "Nessie." She held up a hand. "Let me go first." He nodded. "I don't get attached to patients," she said, eyes fixed on his. "I figured, but you're not just a patient. You're complicated." He smirked. "That sounds like a polite insult." "It's not. It's an acknowledgement." "Of what?" "Of the fact that I didn't come back tonight because of protocol. I came back because I missed you." James's heart skipped once. "I thought about you all afternoon. About Florence, too. About the way she lights up when you talk to her, even when you're pretending not to be exhausted." James swallowed. "I don't remember the last time anyone saw that." "I see all of it," she said gently. "Even the parts you don't say out loud." The air tightened. James leaned in slightly. Nessie didn't move. He brushed her knuckles with his. "I think about you constantly," he said. "Every moment since I woke up with your voice in my ears. I was singing to Florence, but it brought me back too." She didn't pull away. Instead, she asked, "Why me?" James didn't hesitate. "Because when you touch anything, my daughter, my shoulder, my heart, it stops hurting." Her breath caught. James leaned in further. Their faces were close now, too close for retreat. "Tell me to stop," he whispered. "I can't," she murmured. Then his lips touched hers. Softly. Once. Twice. She exhaled like she'd been holding it in for years. And he kissed her again. Not rushed. Not desperate. Just deep enough to say, "I see you." Just long enough to whisper, "Don't go." Her fingers found the side of his face, her thumb brushing along his, cheek as his hand slid to her waist, guiding her gently into his lap. They fit. Surprisingly, undeniably. Nessie let out a small laugh against his lips. "We're in a recliner." James smiled, voice low. "Feels like the center of the world." She kissed him again, this time with intention. Her hands found the collar of his robe, tugging slightly, and his arms wrapped tighter around her like instinct. Every touch was permission, every breath, an invitation. Then Florence mumbled from the couch, "Don't let the unicorns see." They froze. Nessie blinked. She's still half asleep. James rested his forehead against hers. "She always ruins my big moments." "I think she's saving you," Nessie whispered with a grin. James chuckled softly. "From myself?" From jumping too fast. They untangled slowly, not from regret, but from reverence. Nessie sat beside him again, still close, still warm. James reached for her hand and laced their fingers together. "I don't want this to be a moment," he said quietly. "I don't either," she replied. "Then let's take it slow. Real. Day by day." Nessie nodded. "And maybe no more recliner makeouts." James grinned. "Agreed." But it was a solid debut. A minute later, Florence rolled over, her voice muffled in her unicorn. "Just marry her already." James shook his head, laughing. "She's relentless." Nessie looked at him, smiling. She might be right. The suite had grown still. Florence was sound asleep now, truly asleep, with one arm dangling off the couch, and her unicorn face down in a bowl of cereal that no one had the heart to move. James dimmed the lights while Nessie returned from her brief check-in at the nursing station. She stepped back into the room with her ponytail loosened, her cheeks slightly flushed from the hallway chill, her smile unsure, but real. "I shouldn't be here this long," she whispered. "I know," James replied softly, "but I'm glad you are." She crossed the room toward him slowly. Neither rushed, neither hesitated. James met her halfway. He reached for her hand. She gave it willingly. "I keep thinking about what you said," Nessie murmured, "that you're not asking for promises." "I'm not," he said. "I'm asking for truth." She looked at him. "And what if the truth is, I want this more than I should?" James pulled her close, his voice hushed and reverent. "Then we're even." There was no fanfare, no sweeping declarations, just a long silence, and then a kiss that started like an answer to a question they'd both been afraid to ask. Her fingers slid into his hair. His hands moved to the small of her back. When he pulled her closer, she came willingly, mouth soft, breath staggered, lips parting under his with a tenderness that said, yes. She wasn't just responding. She was claiming. Their bodies aligned with ease as James guided her backward until the back of her knees touched the recliner. Nessie whispered against his mouth, "The same chair?" "It's historic now," he teased. She grinned, then pulled him down with her, laughter caught in her throat before it was replaced by something deeper. "Need." James ran his fingers down her sides, tracing the curve of her waist, savoring every inch like it was sacred. She arched beneath him, eyes fluttering closed. "Are you sure?" he asked, voice rough with restraint. Nessie nodded, already breathless. "I've never been more sure of anything I wasn't supposed to want." James kissed her again, slower this time, longer, deeper. The world fell away. Clothes didn't vanish. They were peeled, like secrets. His mouth found her collarbone, then the hollow just above her heart. Her hands tugged his shirt loose, her palms flattening against his back, feeling the strength beneath the softness. He whispered her name like a vow, like an apology for every day before this one. And when he moved inside her, it was without hurry. No rush, just rhythm, just reverence, just the quiet truth of two people finding a home in skin, in sweat, in the spaces they had guarded for too long. Afterward, they didn't speak. They simply stayed, intertwined in the glow of something they hadn't dared believe they could have again. Florence snored from the couch. Nessie smiled into James's chest. "Do you think she'll know?" James brushed his lips against her forehead. "She already does." Silence settled again. But it wasn't heavy. It was complete. James stared at the ceiling, one arm around her, his fingers idly tracing small patterns on her bare shoulder. "I didn't plan any of this," he murmured. "Neither did I," she replied. "And yet, here you are." Nessie lifted her head slightly. "Is that a bad thing?" He looked down at her. "It's the first good thing I didn't control." She lay back against him, her breath slowing. "Your trouble," she whispered. James chuckled. "You started it. I just showed up with crackers and a warm lap, and somehow fixed everything that was broken." Nessie tilted her head to meet his gaze. "Not fixed, just held." He nodded. "That's what I needed, not repair. Just someone willing to stay." She kissed his chest. "Then I guess you're stuck with me." James tightened his grip slightly. "Good, because I'm not letting go." They drifted in and out of light sleep, limbs tangled, hearts calm. The world outside the window glowed silver blue. Inside, healing no longer looked like a hospital bed. It looked like her smile in the dark, like her laughter echoing in the walls, like the quiet rise and fall of her breath beside his. Then came a small voice from the couch. Is anyone going to tell me why you're both glowing, or do I have to write a formal request? Niecy choked on her laughter. James groaned. Florence sat up, rubbing her eyes. Also, we're out of crackers, so I assume you owe me an explanation and a snack. Niecy hid her face in James's shoulder. I can't. James sat up slowly, grinning. Welcome to your new life. Florence pointed. Just so we're clear, if you hurt her, Daddy, I'm going to make your smoothie taste like broccoli forever. James raised both hands. Understood. Nessie reached over and pulled Florence between them, kissing her cheek. I'll make you a deal, she said softly. I'll keep your dad in check. If you keep believing in us. Florence looked at them both, then nodded. Deal. But only if I get my own bathroom when we move in together. James groaned again. Niecy laughed and hugged her tighter. The morning sun tiptoed through the tall windows, casting gold ribbons across the sweet floor. Florence was the first to stir, her eyes fluttering open, head lodged between, her unicorn's face and a decorative pillow she'd claimed as her own. She blinked slowly, then glanced toward the recliner. Her eyes widened. There, still curled up together, were her father and Nurse Nessie, legs tangled, her dad's robe half open, Niecy's curls loose and resting on his chest like a sleepy halo. Florence gasped softly, looked around the room like she'd stumbled upon state secrets, then whispered under her breath, I knew it. She stood, tiptoed toward the recliner, and whispered just loud enough, Hey, adults, I'm awake. Also, you're cuddling in public. James groaned, one eye barely opening. 5 more minutes. Niecy stirred, pulling the blanket up to her shoulder. What time is it? Florence placed her hands on her hips. Time for you both to start explaining why the unicorn and I woke up alone. James sat up slowly, voice gravelly. You were asleep. Deeply. I'm a light sleeper, Florence replied dramatically, especially when betrayal is in the air. Niecy covered her mouth to hide a laugh. James reached for the tea on the nightstand. Sweetheart, you slept through an avalanche yesterday. Details, Florence waved off. The point is, if you two are going to be all kissy-face and cozy, I need to be kept in the loop. I'm basically your life coach. Nessie lost it. She laughed so hard, she had to wipe tears from the corner of her eyes. James muttered, Remind me again why we haven't enrolled her in drama school. Florence beamed. Because I'm already perfect. They eventually migrated to the dining nook, still wrapped in lazy energy. Florence was in her monkey print pajamas again. Niecy wore one of James's oversized cardigans, and James had finally found pants. Waffles steamed on the plate, fresh strawberries, whipped cream in a tiny porcelain bowl that Florence was absolutely abusing. Niecy poured warm syrup onto her plate. Florence pointed a strawberry-tipped fork at her. I've decided something. James glanced up warily. We're listening. I'm writing the vows, she declared. Niecy blinked. The what now? For your wedding, Florence replied casually, stuffing whipped cream in her mouth. Duh. James coughed on his coffee. Wedding? Florence rolled her eyes. I know you haven't technically asked yet, but we all know it's happening. Let's not waste time pretending. Niecy tried to suppress a smile, failing spectacularly. And what would our vows say? Florence sat taller. I promise not to let the unicorn sleep on your face again. I promise to share my juice boxes in sickness and in health. Stuff like that. James snorted. And mine? Florence said solemnly, Yours will start with, I will brush my teeth and stop scaring my child with surprise kisses. They laughed through the rest of breakfast, the kind of laughter that came from comfort, not performance. Afterwards, James walked out onto the terrace, Nessie at his side, both wrapped in shawls against the crisp air. The mountains stretched far and white, powerful yet quiet. I don't remember the last time I felt this. Unstress, he admitted. Nessie nodded. That's what peace feels like. James looked at her. You're doing that. You're letting it in, she corrected. He reached for her hand. So, are we really doing this? Nessie turned toward him. You mean, us? He nodded. All in, no hiding, no pretending I'm just another patient. She smiled. Then yes, we're doing this. He pulled her into his arms, kissing the top of her head. Just then, the door creaked open, and Florence peeked out. "I'm going to need a ring pop until we get a real one. For practice." James grinned. "I'll get on that." Florence waved. "Carry on. I'll be in the hallway writing your love speech." Nacy leaned into James. "She's going to run this relationship." "She already does." Back inside, Florence set up her makeshift writing desk on the floor. With crayons, paper, and an exaggerated sense of responsibility, she scribbled furiously while mumbling, "Dear wedding guests, we are gathered here because my dad finally figured out he's not as charming as he thinks." James whispered to Nacy, "Are we allowed to elope without her?" Nacy whispered back, "Not unless you want glitter thrown at your face for the rest of your life." Later, James rested back on the couch while Nacy read aloud a children's story about a penguin who fell in love with a dolphin. Florence insisted on narrating the emotional parts with exaggerated sighs and gasps. And then the penguin said, "Even if we're from different worlds, I'd still slide across the ice to find you." James blinked. "Did you write this?" Florence grinned. "I might have rewritten it. The original was too boring." Nacy ruffled her hair. "You've got the storytelling gene." Florence looked proud. "It's a burden I carry." As the afternoon sun stretched across the floor and the quiet wrapped around them again, James reached for Nacy's hand without thinking. She didn't flinch. She just laced her fingers through his and smiled. Later that evening, the suite had settled into the warm stillness that only comes after a perfect day. Florence had retreated to the bubble bath she declared a spa for the overworked youth, while James and Nacy sat in the living room, the fireplace flickering low behind them. Nacy curled one leg under herself on the couch, wearing a cotton hoodie borrowed from James. Her curls were pulled into a loose bun, and her face still had traces of strawberry ice cream from dessert. James watched her from across the couch. And then he said it. "I'm scared." Nacy turned gently toward him. "Of what?" James hesitated. "That you, Florence, this piece, it's so good it feels borrowed, like something I'll have to return." Nacy looked at him, calm but firm. "Then maybe it's time to believe you're allowed to keep what's good." He swallowed. "I've gotten so used to waiting for the other shoe to drop." "You're barefoot now," she said softly. "No more shoes, just steps, one at a time." James reached out and traced her wrist with his thumb. "It's not just fear, it's the guilt too." Nacy stayed quiet, letting him unfold. "I look at Florence and wonder if I've done enough, if she knows how hard I've tried, if she'll grow up remembering my breakdowns more than my good days." Nacy moved closer. "She sees you, James. She loves you out loud. She deserves better. She deserves you, fully, not perfect, just present." He leaned forward, forehead resting against hers. "I want to be that. You already are." Just then, Florence burst from the bathroom in a cloud of steam, towel wrapped like a royal cape, water dripping from her elbows. "I'm clean and emotionally refreshed," she announced. James laughed. "Great. That's all I ever hoped for in a daughter." Florence pointed at both of them. "Now it's your turn." Nacy raised an eyebrow. "Our turn?" Florence marched forward. "Yes, the relationship hygiene oath. I made it in the tub. It's non-negotiable." James pinched the bridge of his nose. "Why are you like this?" Florence ignored him and pulled out a damp piece of hotel stationery. "Ahem," she began, reading with extreme seriousness. "I, the adult in question, vow to always brush my emotional teeth and rinse out my bad habits before speaking." Nacy tried not to laugh. "That's surprisingly profound," Florence continued. "I promise to hug when I want to scream, to talk when I want to hide, and to share my metaphorical juice boxes even when I'm cranky." James blinked. "Did you write this or channel a therapist through bath bubbles?" Florence waved the paper. "I may have been inspired by the lavender shampoo. It's powerful." Nacy leaned over and kissed Florence's damp forehead. "I accept your oath." James raised a hand. "Fine. Me too." Florence nodded. "Good. Now we can proceed." "Proceed with what?" Nacy asked, amused. "The three of us being a team. Teams need rules, and I'm in charge of snacks." James grinned. "Of course you are." Later that night, Nacy sat by the fireplace while James cleaned up the kitchen. Florence had fallen asleep mid-sentence while reading her official family speech draft. James returned with 2 mugs of warm cider and sat beside her. She accepted hers with a quiet thank you. For a while, they just sat, fire crackling, air still. Then James spoke again. "There's something I haven't said." Nessie looked at him. "Thank you," he said quietly. She tilted her head. "For what?" "For showing up. I was on duty." "No," he said, eyes steady. "You stayed. Long after you didn't have to. Long after I stopped expecting anyone to." Nessie's voice was soft. "You made it easy to stay." He reached into the pocket of his robe and pulled something out. A small bracelet. It was one of Florence's, made from plastic beads, half of them mismatched, the other half spelling, "Always Us." "She gave me this last year when I missed her recital because I was on a work call," he explained. "She put it in my briefcase, didn't say a word about it, just, let me find it." Nessie held it gently. "She loves big. She does. And I never want to give her a life where that love goes unanswered." "You're not," Nessie replied. "You're just learning how to receive it better." James smiled. "You and Florence, you're the only parts of my life that don't feel like a transaction." Nessie reached for his hand again. "Then let this be your reminder. Not everything worth having comes with a contract." Florence stirred on the couch and mumbled, "No talking while I'm emotionally dreaming." James laughed. "Even in her sleep, she's a drama queen." Nessie smiled. "She's going to change the world." James looked at her. "So are you." They sat a little longer. No need for more words. Just warmth. Just together. And in the quiet, with a fire between them and Florence snoring dramatically from across the room, James whispered the first part of a sentence he hadn't dared speak in years. "I could love you." And Nessie, without missing a beat, replied, "I already do." It started with a knock. Soft. Polite. The kind you wouldn't notice if your life wasn't already teetering between two realities. James answered it half-dressed, still yawning. The resort's concierge stood there with a clipboard and a half-apologetic expression. "Mr. Curry, I just wanted to let you know. There are 3 media vans parked down the lower road." James blinked. "Why?" The man hesitated. "Someone leaked a photo. You, the nurse, holding hands on the terrace." James glanced over his shoulder instinctively. Nessie was still asleep on the recliner, wrapped in a throw blanket, Florence's head resting comfortably against her thigh. Peace, about to be shattered. "Thanks for the heads up," James said. "Can you stall them?" "We're doing our best." The door closed, and reality reopened. James paced for 5 full minutes, then stood frozen for 10 seconds, then walked over to Nessie and gently shook her shoulder. She blinked slowly. "You're pacing. That's never a good sign. We've got company." She sat up, careful not to jostle Florence. "Who? Media? Paparazzi? Bottom feeders?" Nessie sighed. "What did they get?" "A photo. Just us. Outside. Together." She rubbed her eyes. "And that's a scandal?" James gave a small, humorless laugh. "I'm a high-profile widower. You're a nurse at a private recovery retreat. They'll call it opportunistic. They'll tear you apart." Nessie straightened. "And you?" "I'm the grieving billionaire with a soft spot." He added bitterly, "It writes itself." Florence stirred. "Are we under attack?" Nessie kissed the top of her head. "Just the news people being nosy." Florence blinked. "Because you like Daddy?" "Something like that." Florence sat up, wiped her eyes dramatically, and declared, "We don't negotiate with nonsense." James smirked. "What are you, a miniature press secretary?" "Better," she said, jumping down from the recliner. "I'm the truth." They gathered at the breakfast table, no one hungry anymore. James scrolled his phone while Florence built a barricade out of waffles. The internet was doing what it does best, spinning stories from slivers of truth. Grieving tech mogul finds healing in nurse's arms. Billionaire's rebound or real romance. Nurse Nessie, guardian angel or gold digger. James tossed the phone down. "I'm going to sue someone." Nessie stared at her folded hands. "You can't silence them all." "No, but I can protect you." She looked up. Don't what? Don't make this the reason you stop choosing us." He leaned across the table. "I'm not backing away." Nessie nodded. "Good. Because I'm not either." Florence tossed a strawberry at James. "Can you two focus? We've got to fight back with cuteness." A few hours later, the 3 of them walked hand in hand out onto the main terrace, in full view of the photographers below. Nisi wore no makeup, no disguise. James wore a fitted black pullover and resolve. Florence wore her monkey pajamas proudly and waved like royalty. Someone shouted, "Is it true? Are you dating the nurse?" James looked down at Florence. She nodded. So he lifted her into his arms, stepped forward, and said, loud and clear, "She's not just a nurse. She's the woman who held my daughter when I couldn't stand, and she held me when no one else knew how." Flashbulbs exploded. Florence added, "Also, she has the best snacks." Laughter rippled. They went back inside, shut the door, and leaned against it, all three of them. Nessie breathed out. "You really did that." "I really meant it." Florence clapped. "You're officially in the family now. I'll draft your new title." Nessie raised an eyebrow. "Title? Deputy Mom. Comes with bedtime responsibilities and the authority to veto bad soup." Nessie smiled. "I accept the appointment." James kissed her temple. "Looks like we're official." She leaned into him. "We've been official since she shared her crackers." That evening, the resort director came by to offer extra security and a longer stay at no charge. James declined. He had made a different decision. "We're going home," he told Nessie as they packed. Nessie glanced at him. "Together? If you want to." Florence poked her head out of the suitcase. "I already packed her toothbrush." James turned to Nessie. "We can make this work. We are making it work." Nessie stared at him, suitcase half-zipped, her heart already years ahead of her luggage. "Then let's go home." The luxury car eased down the mountain road, its black chassis reflecting patches of melting snow as it wound through the curves. In the back seat, Florence sat with her unicorn, sunglasses far too large for her face scribbling in a notepad. "This is my press statement," she announced. James looked up from his phone. "What's it say?" Florence cleared her throat. "To whom it may concern, no, she's not a honey trap. Yes, Daddy's feet still smell weird. Yes, I gave her permission to date him. Sincerely, the CEO of everything." Nessie laughed softly. "I love that she thinks she runs the world." "She does," James replied. "We just live in it." But the humor was short-lived. By the time they reached James's penthouse, the lobby was already abuzz. Security met them in the private underground garage. The head of PR was waiting in the hallway with a folder, eyes sharp. "You've seen it?" she asked. "I've seen some of it," James replied, ushering Florence toward the elevator. The PR woman opened the folder, revealing headlines and screenshots. "The nurse and the billionaire, an Alpine Affair Curry's caretaker or career climber. Sources confirm, Nurse Nessie moved into CEO's home. She cracked his heart, and maybe his finances." Nessie's face tightened. Florence squinted. "These people are extra." James took the folder, skimmed it, then dropped it onto the entry table. "Call a press conference," he said. The PR woman blinked. "You want to address this publicly?" James nodded. "This time, I'm not letting someone else control the story." That afternoon, James stood in front of a podium set up in his company's media room. Sleek backdrop, minimalist design, cameras everywhere. Nessie stood behind the curtain, Florence beside her. James glanced back once before stepping into the light. Then, with no script, no teleprompter, and no hesitation, he spoke. "I've spent years building a name that stands for innovation, resilience, and results. But for the past few days, I've been reminded that names don't hold value. People do. Yes, I had a medical emergency. Yes, I collapsed. Yes, a nurse was there. But what you don't know, what no tabloid can understand, is that the woman you're turning into a headline saved more than my heart. She showed up for my daughter when I couldn't. She held my hand when I forgot I had one. She didn't ask for attention, cameras, or favors. She asked if I'd eaten that day, if I remembered how to laugh, if I wanted to try again. This is not a scandal. This is a beginning." The room was silent. Then a single reporter raised her hand. "Is the relationship ongoing?" James smiled. "It's evolving, like anything worth keeping." Another hand. "Do you plan to separate your personal life from your professional one?" James looked straight into the camera. "I plan to live honestly, wherever that leads." Backstage, Florence clapped once. Mimic dropped. Nessie exhaled slowly. The press would still spin. That was inevitable. But now the truth had a heartbeat. Later that evening, they sat together on the rooftop garden. The city twinkled below. Florence built a tower of macarons, while Nessie leaned her head on James's shoulder. "Did I say too much?" he asked. No, Niecy replied. You said what mattered. Florence added, also, the part where you talked about her hand? Very poetic. I wrote it down in my book. James smiled. You're writing a book now? Florence nodded. It's called How My Dad Got His Groove Back. Nessie burst into laughter. But beneath the jokes, James turned to Nessie and asked quietly, Are you still okay with this? With being seen? Nessie looked up at him. I didn't fall in love with a quiet life, James. I fell in love with you, noise and all. That night, they curled into bed together for the first time in his own home. Familiar walls, new warmth. As Florence drifted off in her own room, finally, James kissed Niece's bare shoulder and whispered, Thank you for staying. Niece whispered back, Thank you for letting me. The next morning, the kitchen was unusually quiet. No cartoons, no jungle pajamas, no exaggerated juicebox declarations. Just Florence, sitting at the kitchen island, staring at the front page of a glossy entertainment magazine. On the cover, a photo of James holding Nessie's hand, Florence between them, mid-giggle. The headline in all caps, The Honey Trap with a Toddler Twist? Florence looked up from the magazine, utterly serious. Daddy, she asked, what's a honey trap, and can I eat it? James, mid-coffee sip, choked so hard he nearly dropped the mug. Nessie froze at the fridge, orange juice in hand. Florence waited, tapping her fingers on the granite. Well, she prompted. James cleared his throat. Sweetheart, it's not a snack. Then what is it? Nessie stepped in quickly. It's a term adults sometimes use when they don't understand what kindness looks like. Florence blinked. So, it's just a fancy insult? Exactly, James said. The wrong kind. Florence folded the magazine. Then I'm gonna need a megaphone and a press pass because I've got things to say. Later that morning, Florence staged a press conference in the living room. Using her karaoke microphone and a hand-painted sign that said facts only, she stood on a step stool behind the coffee table, hair in wild curls, unicorn pajamas still wrinkled from sleep. James watched from the couch. Nessie, barely holding in her laughter, sat beside him. Florence tapped the mic. Testing. 1, 2. This is an official child announcement. She adjusted her invisible blazer. To everyone saying Niecy is a honey trap, she began. I'd like to clarify that she has never trapped anyone, except maybe in a hug. Niecy covered her mouth. Florence continued. She did not ask Daddy for anything. In fact, she gave me her juice and crackers before she ever gave Daddy anything. James whispered. That's technically true. Florence raised a hand. We are not answering questions at this time. Niecy nearly fell off the couch laughing. After her statement, Florence demanded pancakes as a reward for defending the family name. James obliged, and while he cooked, Niecy sat on the countertop, legs swinging, watching him. You realize she's officially more media trained than I am, Niecy said. She's a professional, James replied. She's been in charge since she learned to talk. Niecy smiled. But this, all this, is a lot for a kid. For any of us. James paused, flipping a pancake. You want to hit pause? Nessie shook her head. No. I just want to make sure we're moving at a speed we can both survive. He looked over at her. Then let's choose our pace together. After breakfast, James's assistant called. The gossip site that ran the Honey Trap headline was offering an exclusive interview, one where they promised to clear the air. James declined without hesitation, but the request lingered in Niecy's mind. She turned to him later that afternoon. Do you think me staying with you really hurt your image? James stopped what he was doing. Does it look like I care? Niecy hesitated. It's not about you. It's about Florence, her school, her future. James stepped closer. You're already thinking like her mother. Nessie blinked. Is that okay? He kissed her forehead. It's perfect. That night, James found Florence in her room, coloring a sign that read, No mean people allowed in our family. He sat on the edge of her bed. That's a bold sign. Florence nodded. I'm putting it on the front door. Think that'll stop the press? No, she said. But it'll remind us. James pulled her close. You're the smartest person I know. Florence yawned. I know. That's why I picked her for you. James froze. Picked her? Yeah, Niecy. I told her you needed someone to help your heart work again. James pulled the covers tighter around her. You really did, didn't you? Florence smiled sleepily. You're welcome. In the living room, Nisi sat alone, legs tucked under her on the recliner. James walked in and stood silently for a moment. I love you, he said. Nisi looked up. And then, without fanfare, she said it too. I love you. They didn't rush to close the space between them. They didn't need to. They were already home. The next morning, they didn't check the news. They didn't scroll, didn't refresh, didn't peek. Instead, James made waffles. Nisi poured the juice. And Florence spent 20 solid minutes trying to convince both of them that syrup was a suitable hair conditioner. We need to make a statement, she declared, plopping down at the kitchen island with full authority. James raised a brow. Didn't you already do that yesterday, with a microphone and glitter on your eyelids? Florence crossed her arms. We need a bigger one. One that shuts everyone up. Nessie leaned on the counter, amused. What did you have in mind? Florence grinned like she'd been waiting all night for that question. Hold hands. But, louder, James and Nisi exchanged glances. What does that mean exactly? James asked. It means if you're going to be together, Florence explained, you shouldn't act like you're sneaking snacks at midnight. Nessie laughed. So, no more being subtle? Nope, Florence said. Full PDA, or at least medium PDA. James smirked. Are you seriously giving us relationship rules? Florence took a bite of waffle. Someone has to manage this family's reputation. Later that afternoon, James had a meeting at his company's downtown HQ. The executive floor had never seen him arrive in casual wear, much less with a woman at his side and a child leading the elevator tour. Florence marched down the marble corridor like she'd been born in boardrooms. This is where he makes deals, she told Nessie. Mostly boring ones. James opened the door to the main conference room where his entire executive team waited, silent, watching. And he did exactly what Florence suggested. He held Nessie's hand, loudly, firmly, deliberately. This is Nisi, he said. She's with me, not just today. Moving forward, murmurs. A few smiles. One exec coughed nervously. Florence added, if anyone here says anything mean about her, I will personally switch your screensaver to baby unicorns. The room fell into stunned silence, then laughter. One woman leaned in. Honestly, I'm more scared of her than the quarterly report. After the meeting, the trio stopped at the company cafe downstairs. Staff pretended not to stare. Some failed. James ordered 3 hot chocolates. Florence dipped her croissant dramatically and said, Daddy used to eat lunch alone. Now, he has a girlfriend and syrup in his hair. Nessie's eyes widened. Do I? Florence grinned. Nope. Just testing your panic reflexes. James leaned over. We're not hiding anymore. Nessie nodded. Then we should probably expect more stares. Let them stare, James said. We'll hold hands louder. That evening, back at the penthouse, the doorbell rang. Florence sprinted to open it. It was the building manager, holding a bouquet and an envelope. These came from Miss Hubbard, he said. Florence took the flowers. I'll screen them for bees. Nessie opened the note, for the woman who didn't ask to be part of a spotlight, but still managed to shine anyway. Jay. She looked at James. You're making this harder to keep casual. James stepped forward. Good. Because I'm not interested in casual. Florence poked her head around the corner. So, is now a bad time to bring out the cupcakes I decorated with proposal rings on top? Nessie froze. Proposal? Florence shrugged. I'm not saying it has to be today, but if it is, I've got glitter glue. Family, let's pause for a moment. Are you truly feeling the depth of this journey? If this message is striking your heart, type I feel it, Dr. Phillips, in the comments right now. Your words let me know we're walking side by side. Don't just watch, be part of the story. Hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs it, and make sure you're subscribed so you never miss a heartbeat of love and twilight. James gave her a warning look. We talked about letting people breathe, remember? Florence sighed. Fine, but just so you know, glitter glue is a limited time offer. That night, they sat on the rooftop terrace again. City lights. Shared blanket. Silence so peaceful, it didn't beg to be filled. Nessie leaned into James. Do you ever think this will get easier? He turned to her. I don't want easier, I want worth it. She looked at him. You always know the right thing to say. I've got a 9-year-old scriptwriter in the house. I'm learning from the best. She laughed. then turned serious. I love you. James looked at her. Say it again. Nisi smiled. I love you. Florence's voice rang out from the living room window. We heard that. Relationship confirmed. James grinned. She's never letting this go. Nisi rested her head on his shoulder. Good. Florence was pacing the living room in her sparkly socks and a tiara that tilted to one side like it had seen war. Okay, she said, holding a clipboard. We've practiced this. If you mess it up, I'm replacing both of you with stuffed animals. James sat on the couch, trying not to laugh. Is that a real threat? Stuffed animals don't interrupt my speeches, Florence replied. Nisi peeked out from the hallway, adjusting her cardigan. You're taking this very seriously, as I should. This is a pre-engagement party, Florence declared, and I will not have it ruined by bad lighting or emotional hesitation. James leaned toward Nisi and whispered, We're being run by a glitter general. Nisi whispered back, and I'm weirdly okay with it. Florence took her place in front of the fireplace, now decorated with handmade paper flowers and a banner that said, Step 1, say yes. Welcome, she began, to the world's first daughter-led almost wedding. James choked on his sparkling water. Florence continued, We are gathered here because my dad is in love, and I, being the main emotional stakeholder in this family, have decided it's time for a title upgrade. Nisi raised a brow. A what? Florence pointed at her dramatically. From Nurse Nessie to Mama Nessie. Silence. Then James stood up, reached into his pocket, and pulled out a small velvet box. Nisi's breath hitched. Florence froze. Wait, what? I didn't plan this part. James turned to her. You don't get to plan everything, love bug. Then he faced Nessie and opened the box. Inside was a simple gold ring, curved like a quiet promise, set with a single diamond, not flashy, but deep. Like her. Nisi Hubbard, James said, voice steady. I fell for you without warning. I didn't expect you, didn't plan for this, but somehow you showed up and everything softened. She stared at him, eyes glistening. You are grace where I had guilt, joy where I had noise, stillness where I had nothing but pressure. You love my daughter like she's always been yours, and somehow you made room for me too. He got down on one knee. Will you marry me? Florence covered her mouth. Nisi said nothing for a full 5 seconds, then nodded, once, twice, then said through a cracking voice, Yes. James exhaled hard, slipped the ring onto her finger. Florence exploded into cheers, grabbing both their hands and shouting, It's legally Mama Nessie time. The celebration that followed was a blur of cupcake icing, off-key karaoke, and Florence asking if the wedding could be unicorn-themed just enough to be magical, but not enough to scare the guests. Nessie sat beside James on the couch later, her head on his shoulder, her hand in his. He glanced at the ring on her finger, then at her face. You sure you're ready for this circus? She nodded. You and Florence, you're the only kind of chaos I've ever wanted. Florence came in wearing a blanket like a veil. I now pronounce us a trio, she said, placing plastic rings on her own fingers. Let no one separate this squad. Ever. James reached out and pulled her into a hug. Nessie followed, and the three of them sat tangled on the couch. No stage, no press, no audience. Just family. No paper needed, just presence. Later that night, when Florence was finally asleep and the lights were low, James pulled Nessie close. Say it again, he murmured. She looked up. Yes? No, he whispered, brushing his lips along her jaw. Mama Nessie, she grinned. You're impossible, and yet you said yes. You can't just wear a wedding, Florence announced dramatically from the center of the bridal boutique. You have to command it. Nisi stared at her reflection in the mirror. The first gown was too stiff. The second was too sparkly. The third? She stepped out of the fitting room and turned slowly. James blinked. Florence's clipboard dropped. Okay, she whispered. Now we're talking. The gown was off-white, with delicate lace sleeves and a flowing skirt that trailed like a whisper. No sequins, no extra, just elegance stitched with ease. James stood and walked over, pulling back her hair gently to see the full neckline. You look like a calm before a storm, he said. Nisi smiled. That's oddly poetic for a man who once wore socks with flip-flops. Florence gasped. He did not. He absolutely did, Nisi replied, turning with a teasing grin. James shrugged. You try parenting solo and keeping your wardrobe respectable. Florence smirked. I accept your tragic past. But from here on out, fashion is a family matter. They moved to the flower selection area next. The planner asked what kind of bouquet Nessie wanted. I was thinking soft pinks, she said. Maybe some white tulips? Florence raised her hand. Objection. James winced. She's been watching courtroom dramas again. I'm just saying, Florence continued, if we're celebrating a love that survived a public scandal, a fainting spell and a syrup incident, then your bouquet should include spiky flowers. Spiky? Nessie asked, amused. Like symbolizing strength, Florence explained. Maybe thistles. Something that says, I've been through things but still bloom. Nessie blinked. James nodded slowly. She's not wrong. In the dessert tasting room, things got chaotic. Florence tried to convince the baker that cupcakes shaped like dinosaurs were not only thematic but historically accurate. You weren't even there, she told James. You didn't see the Jurassic era, but I've researched. Nessie laughed so hard she had to sit down. Florence grinned. Okay, fine, maybe not all dinosaurs, but at least one cupcake should look like me with a crown. After hours of fitting, tasting, and debating whether a flower girl could carry a disco ball down the aisle, answer, only if she promises not to swing it, they returned home with sketches, samples, and a shared sense of excitement. In the living room, Florence sat in front of the fireplace, scribbling vows for everyone. James watched Nessie from the doorway, arms crossed. She's building a ceremony the way I build code. Nessie looked over her shoulder. Intentional. Focused. James nodded. And wildly prone to improvisation. That night, James drew her into his arms before bed. Do you ever stop to think how fast this happened? Nessie whispered. James shook his head. No. Because nothing that feels this right needs to be slow. She traced the outline of his jaw. You're sure you're not just caught up in the moment? He took her hand, kissed her fingers. I've lived through too many empty moments. I know the difference now. In the next room, Florence could be heard mumbling her practice speech to her stuffed animals. I now pronounce you husband, wife, and unreplaceable kid. Nessie laughed softly into James's chest. Do you think she'll always be like this? James looked toward the wall. If we're lucky. The night closed with the three of them in bed. Florence tucked between them. Cupcake sketches in hand, Nessie humming gently as James stroked her hair. No big audience. Just big love. And a glitter plan in motion. The air in the Swiss Alps that morning tasted like beginnings. Cool, crisp, with just enough sun to make the sky blush. The garden behind the retreat center had been transformed overnight. White chairs lined the aisle. Lavender petals dusted the path. Twinkling fairy lights wrapped around the olive trees, swaying slightly in the breeze. Florence stood in front of the mirror, adjusting her mini blazer and bow tie. Dad, she said, how do I look? James knelt behind her. Like the president of Cutieville. I'm the minister of vows, thank you very much. Nessie peeked in, veil pinned softly to her low bun. We're on in 5. The guests were few, just the closest friends and a few staff from the retreat who had become family. No paparazzi, no PR, just peace. Florence walked down the aisle first, holding a sign that said, Here comes my favorite person, and also my dad's fiancée. The laughter softened every face. Nessie followed, her steps slow and unshaken, bouquet made of thistles, tulips, and Florence's favorite, tiny daisies. James turned when he felt her presence, and time stopped. When she reached him, he didn't speak. Not yet. He simply held her hands and looked at her like she was the only thing he'd never try to control. The officiant welcomed everyone and asked, who would like to begin the vows? Florence raised her hand first. Everyone turned. She marched to the center. I wrote something, she said, and I think it's important. James started to protest, but Nessie held his arm. Let her. Florence pulled out a crumpled paper. To Nessie, who became my mama without being asked. You brushed my hair when I cried about school. You made waffles when I was sick. You let me paint your toenails even though you have the most ticklish feet in the world. Laughter bubbled. And James, Dad, you let her in. You let her stay. You let her love me. And you didn't mess it up this time. So I guess that's all I ever wanted. She turned to the guests. You may now resume your sobbing. James stepped forward. He looked at Nessie, not the crowd. I didn't think I could do this again, he began. I didn't believe love was a place I'd be welcomed back to. The garden hushed. I thought I'd ruined too much, that being strong meant being alone. Then you happened, quietly, beautifully, with a voice that could calm my worst hours. He paused. You taught me to rest without guilt, to love without proof, and to believe in me, in us, in this little family we built. He exhaled. If life is the code, then you're the one line that makes the whole program work. Nacy wiped a tear and began. I used to think love had to be loud, she said, that it needed grand gestures or endless declarations. She looked at Florence, then back to James. But the kind of love that lasts is gentle. It checks your pulse when you're sleeping. It holds your hand during blood tests. It brings tea and forgiveness and silence when words are too heavy. Her voice broke. And now, standing here, becoming yours, I know this isn't just a wedding. It's a homecoming. The officiant opened their mouth, but Florence stepped forward again. One more thing, she whispered. She handed each of them a homemade ring box. These are made from cardboard and glitter, just like our family, messy, shiny, and somehow unbreakable. James chuckled. A Curry original. Nacy laughed through tears. Perfect. They exchanged rings, kissed, and the crowd clapped softly. Florence cleared her throat. I now pronounce you Team Curry. Louder claps. Then Florence added, Dad, you may now kiss the nurse. James grinned. I've been kissing her before you could even pronounce. He kissed Nacy again. Longer this time. Florence looked away dramatically. Please. Children are present. The reception was held under string lights, with homemade cupcakes, a playlist curated by Florence, and wild dancing. The first dance was interrupted by Florence sliding across the grass on her knees, screaming, My turn! No one minded, not even a little. That night, when the last guest had gone and the stars had taken their shift, above the garden, James and Nacy sat wrapped in one blanket on a bench. Florence lay asleep on the other bench, cupcake frosting on her cheek, tiara askew. I've never been this happy, Nacy whispered. James kissed her shoulder. You should get used to it. She smiled, laying her head on his chest, because this wasn't the end. It was the middle of something good. The reception had barely begun before chaos and cake took over. Under the starlit tent in the retreat's garden, fairy lights glimmered and soft jazz played. The tables were tastefully decorated with floral centerpieces, and the guests looked poised to enjoy an elegant evening. That was until Florence walked up to the microphone. Clad in her sparkly sneakers and a white flower crown, she cleared her throat and raised her juice box high. A toast, she declared, to the woman who dared to love my dad, and to the man who didn't let his robot heart win. The crowd laughed. James narrowed his eyes. Robot heart? Florence shrugged. Everyone knows you used to function on sarcasm and spreadsheets. She continued. Nacy, you're the only person who didn't treat me like the daughter of the CEO. You treated me like a person with big thoughts and bigger hair. And you let me be me, even when me meant glitter everywhere and science projects that exploded the blender. Nacy smiled warmly. Florence turned to James. Dad, you didn't just marry a woman, you married a walking upgrade. She's like version 2 of everything you didn't know you needed. James chuckled and mouthed, Fair. Florence raised her juice box again. To love, to waffles, and to families that form not from perfection, but from persistence. The entire garden echoed with claps and a few misty eyes. Then she added, Now if no one minds, I'd like to cut the cake. Aggressively. The cake was 5 tiers tall and breathtaking, white with soft blue accents and edible gold detailing. Florence took the knife with way too much excitement. James leaned over. Florence, this is a sacred tradition. Florence responded by smearing a dollop of frosting on his nose. Nacy gasped, then retaliated with a full swipe to Florence's cheek. And just like that, the elegant garden wedding reception turned into a frosting war. Guests howled with laughter as even the officiant caught a dollop on his tie. Florence yelled, This is why I wore sparkle armor, and ducked behind a chair. Later that night, with frosting cleaned off and the sugar crash finally taking hold, the newly formed trio piled onto the sofa in the lounge suite of the retreat. Nacy had changed into a silk robe. James wore pajama pants covered in binary code. Florence was in a dinosaur onesie. They huddled under a giant comforter, surrounded by popcorn, 2 tablets streaming cartoons, and 3 mugs of hot chocolate. I vote we watch something educational, James offered. Florence booed. Sir, this is my post-toast reward. I want explosions. I want drama. I want animated ducks with laser eyes. Niecy grinned. I second that. Halfway through the movie, James reached for more popcorn and accidentally elbowed Florence, who dramatically flopped over. You've broken my ribs. She groaned. You don't even have ribs yet, he teased. I'm delicate, she moaned. Niecy, tell him I require chocolate compensation. Niecy handed her a truffle. Here. Official apology from House Curry. Florence took it solemnly. Accepted, but only because this is dark chocolate. The night wore on with goofy dancing, whispered promises, and Florence trying to choreograph a family TikTok, even though James had 2 left feet. At one point, she got up and dragged James by the hand. You don't get to marry her and sit out the celebration, she said. Nessie laughed as James stumbled through a 2-step that quickly turned into an interpretive wiggle. I call this the dad in tech crisis dance, he joked. Florence clapped. Trademark it. As the hour neared midnight, Florence lay across both of them, eyelids fluttering. Hey, she mumbled sleepily. Thanks for not making love boring. James kissed her forehead. You're the reason it isn't. Nessie stroked her curls. You turned our wedding into a playground. Florence yawned. Good. Grown-ups forget how to play. Her eyes closed. Moments later she was asleep, arms thrown wide, toes wiggling under the blanket, a smile still tucked into her cheek. James looked over at Niecy. I never thought my best night would involve dinosaur pajamas and icing in my socks. She chuckled. And I never thought I'd find romance inside a juice box toast. He wrapped an arm around her shoulders. Promise me something, he said softly. Even when the cameras return, the interviews, the world, promise me this stays sacred. Niecy leaned in. This isn't for the world. This is ours. They kissed. And somewhere in the background, the cartoon ducks exploded triumphantly. The honeymoon suite was perched on a slope above Lake Oceanin, a glass and stone marvel with floor-to-ceiling windows, and a view that looked borrowed from a dream. Inside, laughter echoed against the walls. Florence had just been bundled off to her own room by the resort nanny after 5 bedtime. Stories, 3 songs, and a passionate speech about why penguins were the superior species. Now, silence, at least until James turned from the window and caught sight of Nessie. She was wearing his white shirt, barely buttoned, and standing barefoot, on the heated wood floors, sipping wine like she owned the moon. He leaned against the doorframe. You are trouble. She smiled lazily. Why, Mr. Curry? Because you're wearing the shirt I nearly presented a TED Talk in, and suddenly I can't think straight. Niecy walked over, tilted her head, and whispered, Good. You overthink everything. The kiss started soft, but soft didn't last. His hand slid around her waist, hers into his hair, and the way her fingers clenched the fabric at his back unraveled every thread of restraint he thought he still possessed. They tumbled to the couch, laughter interrupting every few kisses. I've never done this in the Swiss Alps, she teased, straddling him. I've never done this with someone who smells like vanilla and justice, he replied, voice roughened. You think I smell like justice? Divine justice, he corrected. For every woman who should have broken me and didn't. As their limbs tangled and the fireplace crackled low, their rhythms shifted. What started as need dissolved into something quieter, more deliberate. James sat up and cupped her face, searching her eyes. You're not a detour in my life, he said. You are the road. Niecy blinked. That's the most romantic tech metaphor I've ever heard. He laughed, pressing their foreheads together. I'm serious. Everything before you feels like an echo. Her smile softened. Then let me be your sound. Under the blanket they shared on the floor, post-euphoria and breathless, James traced lazy circles on her thigh. Niecy reached for his hand and held it still. James, can I tell you something scary? His brow furrowed. Always, she inhaled. Sometimes I think, if Florence wasn't in the picture, you never would have looked twice at me. He stiffened. Her voice was gentle. You were a man sealed off from softness, from mess, and I was both. James turned fully toward her, propping himself on one elbow. I need you to hear this. I didn't fall in love with you because you healed Florence. He reached for her hand, interlacing their fingers. I fell in love with you because when I was broken, you didn't rush to fix me. You sat with me, in silence, with grace. And yes, you were a nurse, but what you gave wasn't medicine. It was permission. Nessie's throat tightened. Permission? to feel, to fail, to be. They lay in that silence for a while. The wind brushed against the windows like a lover jealous of the warmth inside. Eventually, Nisi whispered, "My mom would have liked you." James turned his head. "Yeah? She'd have told you to cut your hair, though." He chuckled. "She sounded strict. She was fierce and soft, like a lion with chamomile tea. I wish she'd met Florence." James kissed her temple. "She's here. In you." Nisi closed her eyes, chest rising with a sigh that was half ache, half peace. "I'm not used to being safe like this." He whispered, "You never have to feel unsafe again. Not with me, not with us." Later, they played a game. "What's the one thing you'll never compromise on?" she asked, curled against him. He thought for a moment. "Kindness. The world's hard enough. I want our home to be where we all land soft." Nessie's eyes shimmered. "Okay, your turn." He grinned. "What's your biggest secret?" She chewed her lip. "I sometimes leave extra cheese in Florence's omelets when you're not looking." He gasped. "Betrayal." She laughed into his chest. "And I kept your shirt from that first hospital night. The one you left in the linen cart by accident." He looked mock horrified. "You stole corporate property. I sniff it when I miss you." James blinked, then cracked up. "You're adorable." Nessie rolled her eyes. "I'm trouble, remember?" "Right." He nodded solemnly. "Delicious, permanent, lifelong trouble." Just before sleep claimed them, James murmured, "You know, I thought I'd have to spend the rest of my life pretending not to want more." Nessie opened one eye. "And now I have more than I ever imagined, and I want to spend forever protecting it." She kissed his jaw. "Forever starts now." Their first official night in the shared mountain home wasn't quiet. It was chaotic, beautifully, hilariously chaotic. A 3-tier cake had been dropped in the driveway by Florence, who insisted she was carrying it like a princess. A pair of James's Italian leather shoes were now mysteriously floating in the backyard hot tub. And someone, no one admitted it, had painted the dog's nails pink. James was pacing the living room in socks, tie loosened from unpacking, as Florence marched in front of him with a clipboard. "Okay, rule number 1, she announced. "No fighting before breakfast, only after waffles." Nessie, curled on the couch with her legs tucked under her, bit her lip to keep from laughing. "Got it. So all negotiations must be fueled by syrup?" "Exactly." Florence nodded, scribbling. James raised a brow. "Who put you in charge?" Florence pointed to her head. "See this crown? Invisible, but powerful." Nessie whispered, "She takes after you." James looked over. "You sure she's not your clone? She practically just grounded me for leaving crumbs in the car." Florence interrupted. "Rule number 2. Whoever farts first has to apologize with chocolate." James choked. "That's a rule?" "It's a legacy," Florence replied solemnly. Later that evening, dinner was pancakes, mini sausages, and grapes served in wine. Glasses, because Florence declared every first dinner should be fancy. They ate cross-legged on the living room floor, candles flickering in jam jars, jazz playing softly in the background. James took a deep breath. This is the best chaos I've ever known." Nisi reached for his hand. "Because it's yours?" "No," he whispered. "Because it's ours." Florence clinked her juice glass against theirs. "To family, the wild, weird, waffle-eating kind." After dishes and an impromptu karaoke session, Florence's rendition of Let It Go included interpretive, dance, and a flying sock. James slipped into the den to check an alert on his tablet. Nisi followed. He didn't hear her come in until her arms wrapped around his middle from behind. "Work?" He nodded. "Just a minor server ping. Won't take long." She swayed with him for a moment, cheek pressed to his back. "You're allowed to leave the Empire for a night." He sighed. "I know. I'm just adjusting." She came around and sat on the edge of his desk. "To what?" He looked at her, this woman who had walked into his life with quiet defiance and endless heart. "To feeling like I belong here, not just as a CEO or a guest in someone else's life, but like this house, this noise. It's my home." Nisi smiled. "That's because it is, James." He leaned into her touch as she cupped his face. "Then let's keep it messy. Let's keep it loud. Let's make it ours." Meanwhile, Florence was in her room placing glow the dark stars on her ceiling. Loudly, "Mommy, Daddy James." Come see my constellation. I named it Cheese Army. James blinked. Should we be concerned? Nacy just grinned. Nope, that's legacy, remember? They joined her. Later that night, as the house finally quieted and moonlight filtered through, gauzy curtains, Nacy and James lay in bed, legs tangled, breaths aligned. He whispered, I've had estates, villas, penthouses. But none of them ever felt like this. Like what? Like home. Nacy ran a finger along his jaw. Because this time the walls aren't made of money. They're made of love and glitter glue. He chuckled. And rules. So many rules. She smirked. Don't forget the chocolate fart penalty. I'll never forget, he said with mock solemnity. You married me into a monarchy. And our queen snores like a bear cub. They laughed quietly, careful not to wake the snoring monarch next door. Then silence stretched, not awkward, but warm. James whispered, Do you ever think we were meant to be this all along? Nacy didn't answer right away. She just kissed his forehead and whispered, Yes. Nessie sat on the bathroom floor with a stick in her hand and a head full of disbelief. 2 pink lines, clear as day. She wasn't sure if it was the morning sunlight or her heart that made the room feel like it was glowing. The door creaked open. Florence, wearing a superhero cape, with her toothbrush still in her mouth. I knew it, she mumbled around the foam. You've been acting suspicious, like someone hiding cookies, or a crime. Nacy blinked. What? Florence pointed at the pregnancy test. That. You're gonna pop, aren't you? Nacy opened her mouth to say something maternal and gentle. What came out was, What on earth do you mean, pop? You're pregnant, Florence said like a queen announcing a royal decree, and I've already decided what we're naming the baby. Nessie, still half in shock, could only whisper, already. Florence grinned. Spud. Nacy blinked. Spud? Like potato? Exactly. Florence did a twirl. Because babies are small and lumpy and they cry when mashed. Spud is perfect. Downstairs, James was reading through a morning market report when Nacy descended like a breeze in a thunderclap. He looked up, paused, and his world shifted. Nacy's eyes were wide, vulnerable, shining. James stood slowly. I'm pregnant, she said. Silence. Then, Spud? Florence blurted from behind her mom. James blinked. What? That's what we're calling the baby. Temporary name, don't panic. James exhaled like someone who had just been thrown into a skydiving harness mid-conversation. He walked to Nessie, placed his hands on her face, kissed her gently, then dropped to his knees and pressed his forehead against her stomach. You tiny thing. I already love you. Florence threw confetti. Nobody knows where she got it from. A week later, James and Nacy sat in the most awkward circle of their lives. Prenatal class, flashing PowerPoint slides, a disturbingly lifelike plastic baby named Stanley. Florence, who insisted on attending for research purposes, sat with a notepad and made snide remarks. The instructor smiled brightly. And now we practice breathing. James gave her a look that could only be described as I've negotiated billion-dollar mergers. Why am I breathing like a sea lion? Nacy elbowed him. Breathe, Daddy. Florence mimicked the instructor's voice. Ee-hee-hoo. Hee-hee-hoo. Inhale like you're smelling chocolate. Exhale like you're blowing kisses. Honestly, it's a comedy show. The instructor tried again. James made a noise. It wasn't a breath. It sounded more like a broken accordion. Nessie couldn't hold it anymore. She burst out laughing. Then James. Then Florence. The entire class paused as their corner of the room dissolved into a family-sized giggle meltdown. The instructor gave up. You 3 might be the most entertaining disaster I've ever trained. That night, after the class and a stop for gelato, the family sat in the backseat of their car, parked beneath a star-strewn sky. Florence licked pistachio ice cream and asked, Was I this tiny when I was in your tummy? Nessie nodded. Even tinier. Like a jelly bean. James turned. You kicked like a ninja, though. That was your first act of rebellion. Florence looked thoughtful. Is Spud going to steal my room? James smiled. No way. Spud's getting the one next to yours. But you're still the general of the house? Florence asked. Of everything, he said. She looked down at her cone. Do you think I'll be a good big sister? Nacy reached over and tucked a curl behind her daughter's ear. Sweetheart, you already are. Later that week, James woke up at 2:16 a.m. to the sound of someone opening every cabinet in the kitchen. He patted down in flannel pants. Nessie was standing in front of the fridge with a bowl of mashed potatoes. Cold. Straight from the pot. James squinted. Is this a hostage situation? I wanted potatoes. At 2 a.m.? They called me, she said solemnly. Psychically. Florence wandered in behind them in fuzzy socks. Are we having a family crisis or a snack party? James blinked. Both. They ended up on the couch under blankets, sharing cold mashed potatoes and laughing over baby name ideas. Celestia, Nessie offered. Spudina, Florence countered. Sir Tater Tot, James said. Florence screamed, yes. That night, as the three of them finally drifted off together on the couch, wrapped in warmth, clutter, and half-eaten leftovers, something clicked. Not everything made sense, but everything felt right. This wasn't just a house anymore. It was where love lived, laughed, and occasionally craved potatoes at inappropriate hours. It started with a twitch, then a flutter. Nessie froze mid-sentence. Florence looked up from the floor where she was coloring a big sister survival guide she had, made using glitter, crayons, and 3 threatening stickers that read, "No boys allowed." What's wrong? Florence asked, eyeing her mom's belly like it might suddenly roll off the couch. Nessie pressed her palm against the small swell under her nightgown. I think Spud just moved. James, in a hoodie and pajama pants, dropped his phone so fast it bounced off the couch and hit the dog. They didn't have a dog. That's how serious the moment was. Did you say, move? James asked, nearly leaping over the ottoman. Nessie nodded slowly, eyes wide with emotion. I felt it. The tiniest "oh, there it is again?" Florence squealed. Nessie reached for her daughter's hand. Come feel. Florence placed her small hand against Nessie's belly like it was a secret door to another world. For a second, nothing. Then, thump. Was that the foot? Florence screamed. That night, James could not stop talking to the bump. He lay beside Nessie, whispering things like, "Hey, little bean. I know I panicked when your sister named you Spud, but honestly, it's growing on me. Just don't take it legally." Nessie giggled as he continued, his voice soft and full of awe. "And hey, you've got a room waiting, a sister who'll boss you forever, and a dad who's learning to fold diapers like they're stock portfolios." Nessie raised a brow. "You're still folding them inside out." "It's abstract art," he defended. "Very modern, very cutting edge." Florence called from her room. "Google says the tabs go in the front, Dad." The next morning, James decided to practice on a teddy bear. The bear's name was Harold. Harold did not survive. Florence, arms crossed and supervising like a drill sergeant, watched as James unrolled a diaper with the precision of a man defusing a bomb. "You're going to be the reason Spud gets peed on," Florence declared. James snapped the diaper straps. "Excuse me, Missy. I run 5 international tech divisions. I think I can conquer Velcro." He looked down. Harold was upside down, double diapered, and wearing a sock as a hat. "Okay," James muttered. "Maybe Spud will teach me." Later that day, Nessie invited James to join her on the floor. Yoga mats. Soft music. Low lighting. "Prenatal bonding time," she said, handing him a bottle of oil and her favorite stretch pants. James sat cross-legged. "Should I be scared?" "Yes," Nessie said with a wink. "You're massaging the belly." Florence peeked in with a camera. "This is content for the baby's memory box." James began rubbing gentle circles on Nessie's belly, whispering stories, humming softly. Nessie leaned back against him, eyes fluttering closed. There was no boardroom here, no competition, just skin, warmth, and whispers between two people, building something deeper than legacy. At 2:44 a.m., James jumped out of bed like the mattress was on fire. Nessie groaned. "What now?" James held up a phone. "I read that babies can hear voices now. But what if I haven't been talking enough? What if Spud thinks I'm just the tall guy who orders groceries?" Nessie blinked. "James." It's 2:44 in the morning. He slid into bed, leaned over, and pressed his lips to her stomach. "Spud, it's me, your dad. I approve this message. Florence, from the hallway, can you guys keep it down? Some of us are growing here." From that night forward, it became a ritual. Each evening, After dinner and before bedtime, the family gathered for belly talk. They sat in a circle. Florence read stories. James told the baby about his day, his triumphs, his stumbles, the way he once got locked out of his own office for wearing bunny slippers on casual Friday. Niecy hummed lullabies she swore she forgot. Sometimes Spud kicked. Sometimes Spud was still. But always, they left that circle feeling whole. One evening, after Florence recited a dramatic bedtime poem titled The Tragedy of the Dropped Cookie, she looked at her mom's belly and whispered, "Hey, Spud, if you ever feel scared out here, just find my hand." Nessie's breath caught. James pulled them both into his arms. "You'll never have to face anything alone," he said. "Not in this house," Nessie added. "Not with this weird, sparkly, potato-obsessed team," Florence finished proudly. The countdown began with a squeal. Not from Nessie, not from James, not even from Florence. It was from the neighbor's cat, who darted across the driveway after Florence accidentally flung a balloon into its path while setting up the 1 week till Spud board. Nessie stood by the door, one hand on her belly, the other on her lower back. James watched her like a hawk, but the clueless, well-meaning kind of hawk that reads too many blog articles. "You okay?" he asked for the 100th time that morning. "I'm 9 months pregnant and shaped like a decorative eggplant," Nessie said sweetly. "I'm glowing with grace and back pain." "Help me sit." James rushed over, guiding her gently to the couch. Florence followed with a water bottle, a pillow, and a tub of pickles. "Emergency snack, emergency hydration, and emergency softness," she said, like a tiny doula in training. Nessie blinked. "Why the pickles?" "Because you yelled at Dad for touching yours last night," Florence said casually. "He hasn't recovered." As the week rolled in, so did the waves of preparation. James had turned the nursery into a tech-infused, baby-safe fortress. Sensors monitored room temperature, humidity, and wailing pitch. Florence had made handmade signs for every corner of the house. "No panic allowed in the pantry." "Spud zone. Quiet, please." Mommy's cravings take priority. Nessie, meanwhile, was in full nesting mode. She reorganized kitchen drawers at 2 a.m. She alphabetized the spice rack. She ironed Florence's socks. James watched her in awe and terror. "Should I be ironing mine too?" "You have 5 suits," she said. "No one irons navy blue urgency." Florence was the comic relief and unofficial commander. During one mealtime, she walked into the dining room in a white coat and plastic stethoscope. "All right, team," she said. "We're in the final trimester zone. We can't afford breakdowns. We need hydration. We need teamwork. We need someone to explain what a mucus plug is, because I just Googled it, and I am not okay." James choked on his water. Nessie gave Florence a look. Florence slowly took off her stethoscope. "I'll just bring dessert." One afternoon, James knelt beside Nessie with a tiny notebook labeled Operation Real Name. "We can't keep calling them Spud forever," he said, flipping through the pages. "What about Layla or Elijah?" Nessie shook her head. "Too soft." James grinned. "You want bold?" "I want a name that says, I survived my big sister, my mom's stubbornness, and my dad's diaper tutorials." Florence popped up behind the couch with a whiteboard. "What about Storm or Noodle?" "Florence or Taco Supreme." "Florence." "Fine," she huffed. "I'll just name the next one." James blinked. "Next?" Nessie smirked. "Focus, Daddy." Every evening, they took slow walks around the garden trails near the retreat. Nessie waddled. James held her hand like it was sacred. Florence walked backward, telling stories the entire way. "And if Spud doesn't like carrots, it's fine. We'll raise them on cookies and self-love." Nessie laughed so hard she had to stop walking. James whispered to her belly, "You've got a team here. Weird, wonderful, and ready." At one point, Nessie leaned into James and whispered, "I don't think I ever knew what peace felt like until you both gave me a home." James kissed her temple. "Then let's keep making it. One heartbeat at a time." 3 days before her due date, Nessie yelled from the bathroom, "James." He bolted in, slipping on the hallway rug and knocking into a coat rack. Florence screamed, "Is it time? Should I boil water? Should I call Grandma?" Nessie stood there, drenched in spilled coconut water. Florence blinked. "Oh." James collapsed against the doorframe. "False alarm?" Nessie sighed. "If I survive this week without giving birth on the kitchen floor, I'm throwing myself a party. Florence raised her juice box. To Mommy's bladder, may it be strong and unyielding. The night before the due date, Florence snuck into their room. She curled up between them. They didn't ask why. They just made space. She placed her hand gently on Nessie's belly. "I'm gonna miss being the only kid," she whispered. Nessie kissed her forehead. "You'll always be our first," James added, "and our best chaos coordinator." Florence whispered something to the baby. Nessie asked, "What did you say?" Florence shrugged. "Just told them. It's okay to come now. We're ready." It began, as most Curry Hubbard household adventures did, with Florence yelling dramatically from the hallway, "Mommy's wearing my slippers. Call the police." Nessie waddled into the living room, indeed wearing sparkly pink unicorn slippers, Florence's prized possessions. "They're the only thing I could slide my swollen feet into without crying," Nessie said, gripping her belly. James, hair a mess and shirt half-buttoned, peeked around the corner. "Wait, are we under attack or in labor?" "Labor," Nessie bellowed, doubling over. Florence gasped. "The baby's coming? Like, actually coming?" James froze, blinking at Nessie like she'd just announced the Queen was coming for dinner. Florence grabbed her glittery mini backpack and shouted, "Don't worry, I've got snacks!" While Nessie breathed through a contraction and James panicked about keys, Florence took charge. "I brought granola bars, sour worms, and 3 Capri Suns," she announced. "That's all a delivery room needs, right?" James blinked. "Florence, where's the actual hospital bag?" She stopped mid-step. What now?" Nessie let out a groan. "Did you not pack it like I asked 3 days ago?" James said through clenched teeth. "I thought you were joking." Florence defended. "Who packs a bag to go suffer?" James darted up the stairs, yelling, "I'll do IT myself." Nessie inhaled, exhaled. Florence looked at her with wide eyes. "Don't sneeze, or the baby might fall out." James reappeared moments later, tie half, tied, dragging a duffel bag, a blanket, and somehow a houseplant. "Why did you bring the ficus?" Nessie asked. I panicked. They bundled Nessie into the car. Florence insisted on riding in front to DJ the labor. She chose an odd mix of Beethoven and Beyoncé. "You need calm and courage," she reasoned. "Beyoncé births babies." I read that somewhere. At the reception desk, the nurse asked, "Name?" "Nessie Curry," James answered. "Relation?" "Her panicking husband." "And this?" The nurse pointed to Florence, who wore a superhero cape and clutched her backpack like a weapon. "I'm the emotional support child." They were rushed into a private room. Thankfully, James had arranged everything in advance. Nessie grabbed his wrist as another contraction hit. "You're never touching me again," she hissed. "Totally fair," James winced. Florence handed her a squishy toy. "Breathe through it, Mommy. Imagine you're squeezing Daddy's head instead." Nessie smiled mid-pain. "That helps." A young nurse came in, bright-eyed, too perky. "Hi, I'm Miri. I'll be with you the whole way." Florence whispered to James, "She looks like she's never even stubbed her toe. I don't trust her." Another contraction hit. Nessie screamed. James paled. Florence offered him a Capri Sun. "You'll need electrolytes." As things intensified, Miri said too cheerily, "You're dilated just enough. Let's get comfy." Nessie threw a pillow at her. James whispered, "You okay?" Nessie replied, "If you ask me that one more time, I will bite you." Florence clapped. Teamwork. Hours later, James dozed off in the corner chair. Florence was asleep on 2 chairs pushed together, her superhero cape now covering her face. Nessie groaned loudly. Miri rushed in. "Okay, it's time." James jumped up, tripping over Florence's backpack. He shouted, "Where's the baby?" Florence, still groggy, yawned. "Check your slippers." Everyone laughed, except Nessie, who was too busy pushing a human out of her body. The room dimmed. The air grew thick with anticipation. Nessie gripped James's hand like it was a lifeline. One last push, one final scream, and then, tiny, angry, squalling life. The room was flooded with the sound of a newborn wailing and a mother weeping joyfully. James stared at the baby. "Is that—" "Yup," Nessie panted. "That's Spud." The doctor held the baby up. "It's a girl." Florence popped up. "A girl? I have a sister." She burst into tears. James turned to Nessie. You did it. You brought our chaos full circle. Nessie whispered, I'd do it again. Maybe. Florence shouted, Let's name her Taco Supreme. Everyone laughed, even the baby. The morning sun had barely peeked over the white-tipped Swiss peaks when the first flake fell, fat and heavy, floating like a lazy feather onto the kitchen window. James glanced outside and frowned. Snow wasn't on the forecast. Florence, sitting cross-legged at the kitchen island, eyes glued to her coloring book, replied, The weather app also said you'd win Father of the Year, and here we are. Nessie chuckled from the living room sofa, her hand resting on her very pregnant belly. He's doing his best, Flo. I know, Florence said with a shrug. That's what makes it funnier. By noon, the snow had swallowed the entire driveway. The staff, most of whom were on a weekend break, hadn't returned. Roads were closed. The retreat's emergency helipad was frozen over. And, Nessie? She groaned from the bathroom. James bolted up. Was that a groan of discomfort or a groan of false alarm? Florence peeked around the hallway. It sounded like, This baby's coming whether you like it or not. Nessie waddled out holding her stomach, pale. James, she whispered. My water just broke. He froze. You sure? She held up a soaked towel. Want to debate this? James dashed for his phone, only to see no signal blinking on screen. The landline was down. Even the emergency radio was buried in the storage unit across the snowy courtyard. Florence jumped to her feet. This is like one of those trapped in a cabin with a monster movies, except the monster is Mom giving birth. Nessie raised an eyebrow. Careful. Sorry, Florence said, sheepish. A beautiful miracle who just sounds like a monster when she screams. James took a breath. Okay, it's happening. We've got towels, boiled water, baby blankets, emergency kit. Right? Florence blinked. I have Capri Suns. They prepped the retreat spa suite as a makeshift delivery room, candles still burning. From last night's massages, soft instrumental music playing from the ceiling speakers. James spread a clean sheet across the massage bed. Think the baby will enjoy Enya? Nessie groaned again. The baby wants out. Pick a playlist called Push. Florence bounced around like she was on a mission. She brought juice, lotion, rubber gloves, and, mysteriously, a ladle. James stared. Why the ladle? Isn't that how they pulled me out? That was the umbilical cord clamp, Florence. Oh, well, mine's cleaner. Nessie was on her side, breathing, sweat clinging to her forehead. James held one hand, Florence held the other. I watched 5 YouTube birth videos, Florence announced. James groaned. That's where your education came from? Also, TikTok. One mom did hers in a tub. Nessie's voice was strained. If you run that bath, I'll drown you in it. Florence nodded. Land birth, it is. Another contraction tore through Nessie. She cried out. James paled. Florence slapped him. Stay with us, not above us. I'm fine, just tunnel vision. Florence rolled her eyes. Man up, Daddy. It was time. Nessie screamed. James counted. Florence massaged her shoulder awkwardly with her glittery hands. I think I see hair, Florence said excitedly. Wait, no, that's a raisin from breakfast. False alarm. James blinked. How I's there, a raisin in there. Florence squinted. Kidding. Just wanted to ease the tension. Nessie growled. Floor. I'm serious now. She squeaked. I see the head. James moved to position, hands shaking. Okay, we can do this. You mean she can do this, Florence corrected. You just catch. With one final scream, one mighty push, and a symphony of encouragement. From her mini doula and completely frazzled husband, the baby arrived. A girl. Wrinkled, red, loud, and perfect. James gently wrapped her in a towel and placed her on Nessie's chest. Tears welled in his eyes. Florence, standing at Nessie's head, stared in awe. She looks like a potato. A magical one. Nessie panted, whispering, That's your sister. Florence leaned in, lips trembling. Hi, baby potato. I'm your big sis. If anyone messes with you, I will sit on them. James looked at his 2 girls and his wife and broke. I've never seen anything more perfect in my life, he whispered. Nessie kissed the baby's forehead, then looked at Florence. You were amazing. Florence beamed. Call me Florence the midwife. Now, does anyone want a Capri Sun? The snow hadn't stopped. It had painted the retreat in a thick, glittering hush. But inside the spa suite, the silence had been replaced by something far louder, joy. And screaming. A lot of screaming. Nisi had just birthed a healthy baby girl. Her skin still flushed, her hair plastered to her temples with sweat, but her eyes? Glowing. James held the baby with the reverence of a man cradling the universe. Florence stood in awe, pressing a Capri Sun to her lips like it was champagne. I'm officially a sister, she said with pride. Now someone give me a crown. James was just about to pass the baby back to Nisi when she gripped his wrist, hard. She hissed. James, yes, my queen. There's another one. James blinked. Another what? Florence dropped her juice box. You're joking. Nisi didn't laugh. A nurse, the only one trapped in the storm with them, poked her head in. Contractions again? Nessie let out a feral growl. The nurse rushed forward, eyes wide. Twins. Florence gasped. There's a backup potato? Nisi moaned. The ultrasound missed him, just like James missed the part in vows about no surprises. James, face pale, looked at the tiny baby in his arms. This one didn't even give a warning. He just packed a bag and decided to move out too. Florence clapped. Plot twist. The second labor hit faster, less graceful, more shouting. James tried to soothe her. Nessie swatted him with a pillow. Florence took charge again, hands on hips. All right, team. We've done this before. Towels, affirmations, awkward eye contact. Let's go. James turned to her. Aren't you 10? I've been through more than most. Nessie groaned from the bed. Why did no one warn me I had twins? Florence patted her hand. Mommy. Sometimes life's gifts are wrapped in screaming. Nessie screamed again. Florence whispered to James, that was your cue to shut up and hold a leg. 5 wild minutes later, a tiny, squirming, red-faced boy entered the world with a wail that rivaled his sister's. The nurse wrapped him gently and handed him to James, who stood motionless, baby in each arm, tears streaking his face. I'm outnumbered. Florence looked at the new baby, then at her dad, then smirked. Don't worry, Daddy. I'll train him. First lesson, don't pee on yourself. James laughed through his tears. That might be your most important lesson yet. Florence leaned over the boy's face, her curls brushing his cheeks. Hi, potato brother, she whispered. I'm Florence, chief of snacks and protector of chaos. They nestled together, James, Nessie, and the twins, in the warm glow of the spa lights, wrapped in soft towels and exhaustion. Florence climbed into the bed too, shoving her juice box aside. Squeeze room, please. I'm part of this miracle. Nessie opened her arm, letting Florence lean in. The babies, swaddled and content, gurgled in unison. Why are they so red? Florence asked. Are they mad already? Newborns always look a little grumpy. Nessie smiled. James stroked his son's hair. He's got a temper. Like you. Florence gasped. You mean he's fabulous? Later that evening, as snow danced against the window and quiet filled the suite again, James asked the question. So, names? Florence sat up. I have ideas. James laughed. Do we need to veto them in advance? Possibly. She pulled out a sticky note. Hear me out. Taco and mango. No. Nessie said instantly. Okay. Florence waved her hands. Real suggestions, hope, and harmony. James blinked. That's actually beautiful. Florence shrugged, then smiled. They kind of sound like music and feelings. Nessie reached out and squeezed her daughter's hand. Hope and harmony curry. Florence nodded. You're welcome. I'll accept my crown now. The snow kept falling. But inside the retreat, warmth pulsed in the air. 2 tiny new lives, wrapped in blankets. A mother resting. A father overwhelmed. And a big sister, Florence, sitting cross-legged between them all, whispering lullabies she made up on the spot. If you cry, I'll tickle your feet. If you poop, that's Dad's beat. If you're loud, I'll match your scream. But if you're kind, we're on the same team. James blinked back tears. You're going to be the best big sister. Florence beamed. I already am. Snow still rimmed the edges of the window panes, but inside the luxury retreat turned family haven, warmth reigned. The fireplace crackled. The smell of cinnamon rolls wafted through the kitchen. Nacy, rested, radiant, and finally out of labor mode, sat curled on the couch with 2 sleepy potatoes in her arms. And James? He was halfway across the living room, chasing Florence with a pair of pajama pants in his hand. "Florence Elaine Curry," he called, breathless. "You are not skipping pants for the family photo." Florence peeked from behind the staircase pillar, a mischievous grin on her face. "Dad, I'm wearing the top. That counts." Nacy barely held back her laugh. "Technically, she's 50% dressed." James groaned. "You're encouraging her." Nacy smiled softly. "I'm just finally happy." The idea came from Florence, of course. Everything joyful usually did. "We need a photo," she'd announced that morning. "A real one. No filters, no retakes, just us. In our natural, chaotic, curry-loving glory." James had blinked. "Curry-loving? Our surname is Curry," Florence deadpanned. "We should all be holding spoons." Nacy had rolled her eyes but secretly loved it. And so they'd planned it. Matching pajama tops, red flannel with baby polar bears, 2 sleepy twins, nestled in a basket, James in his Papa Bear slippers, Nacy glowing in the rocking chair. And Florence, who insisted she didn't need pants because freedom is the future. They set up the camera timer. James, balancing a baby in each arm, crouched next to Nacy. She leaned in, resting her head against his. Sleep still painted her features, but so did joy, the kind that only came from survival. Florence darted into the frame just as the timer blinked red. Click. She grinned wide. No pants, 1 sock, and her juice box raised like a toast. James stared at the screen afterward. "Flo." "What?" She shrugged. "You'll thank me when we go viral." They took dozens of photos after that. Some blurry. Some perfect. Most were chaotic. One had Florence sneezing mid-jump. Another had Nacy nursing one baby while burping the other, looking every bit like the warrior she was. In one frame, James blinked at the wrong moment. "Dad blinks like a frightened raccoon," Florence declared. But there was one shot, just one, where time seemed to still. The whole family huddled together on the couch. Nacy looked at James. He looked at her. Florence leaned in, her hand resting protectively over both twins' heads. No one was laughing. They were simply present. Together, complete. Later, as the kids napped and the snow lightened, James stood by the fireplace, scrolling through the gallery. He stopped at that one picture. His fingers hovered over the screen. "Print it?" Nacy asked from behind him, arms folded. "Print it, frame it, maybe put it on a billboard." She smiled. "We don't need billboard." He turned to her, pulling her close. "You sure? I want the whole world to know I finally got something right." Nacy shook her head gently, resting her forehead against his. "You didn't get something right, you chose it." That hit him deeper than she knew. Florence strutted back in, finally wearing her pajama pants. "I did it," she declared. "I made the sacrifice." James gave her a slow clap. "Your future spouse will thank us." She rolled her eyes. "You act like I'm not marrying a celebrity." Nacy laughed. "Just don't marry anyone who uses 3-in-1 shampoo." James nodded. "Minimum requirement, someone who knows how to wash a spoon." Florence grinned, then plopped onto the couch. "Honestly, I already have everything I want." James sat beside her. "You do?" "Yeah." She looked around at the room, the warmth, the love, the babies she was already bossing around. "I've got my forever squad." As the sun dipped below the snow-covered Alps, the family curled together in their nest of blankets, photos, and muffin crumbs. Nacy whispered, "You know what I realized?" James raised a brow. "What?" "This isn't just a retreat anymore." He nodded. "It's home." She shook her head. "No, James, it's our beginning." Florence added, "with matching pajamas and emotional damage from Dad's dance moves." James gasped. "That was a happy dance. You looked like a praying mantis." Nacy grinned. He tried. James leaned back, eyes closed, the weight of every mistake, every regret, slowly replaced with peace. The snow had melted. Not completely, but enough to leave soft puddles on the cobblestones as James stepped. Out of the car, his newborn son tucked gently in the sling across his chest. Nacy emerged next, wrapped in a beige coat. Her hand found Florence's instinctively. Their eyes met, no words needed. They all knew what today was. Not an errand. Not a trip, a return, a reckoning. The wellness hospital's main entrance hadn't changed much. Still pristine, still peaceful. The wind chime above the wooden doors still sang the same notes it had the day James collapsed. But something had changed. James wasn't walking in alone. He had his son strapped to his heartbeat, his daughter beside his wife, and for once, he wasn't the patient. He was the man who had survived the fall, rebuilt from it, and was now walking back, not to erase it, but to honor it. Florence clutched Nessie's hand. "Is this the place where Dad fainted like a confused penguin?" Nessie nodded solemnly. In front of 3 nurses and a vending machine, James groaned. "Don't immortalize that. I already drew it in my diary," Florence smirked. "Page is titled, 'The Fall of Papa Potato.'" The corridor hadn't changed. Polished floors, art-lined walls, the faint scent of lavender and antiseptic. But this time, James wasn't gasping for air or clutching his chest. This time, he stood still, strong, whole. He looked ahead, to the exact spot where he collapsed months ago, and then, slowly, deliberately, he walked it again. Step by step, Florence's small hand clung to Nessie's fingers. The baby stirred in the sling. James paused halfway down the corridor, eyes landing on the mural of the mountain, the same one he had focused on through blurred vision the day his body had failed him. He exhaled, then whispered, "Thank you," not to the art, to the moment, the undoing that became his rebirth. A nurse recognized them immediately. "Mr. Curry?" He turned, smiled. "James, just James today." Nessie stepped forward. "We wanted to say thank you." Florence waved. "And I wanted to see the vending machine again." The nurse chuckled and pointed. "Still there. Still rejecting dollar bills like it has a personal grudge." Dr. Hall, the attending physician from James's initial collapse, walked in. She blinked in surprise. "Well, if it isn't my favorite former cardiac case." James extended his hand. "I'm back. With better oxygen levels and a son." Dr. Hall smiled and glanced down at the sleeping baby boy snuggled against James's chest. "And a family." James nodded. "A loud one, a healing one." Nessie added, "A growing one." Florence beamed. "We brought snacks." They visited the exact room James had stayed in. Florence ran in first. "Wait, this isn't how I imagined it." James smirked. "What were you expecting?" "A haunted corridor, whispering walls, a portrait of you looking ghostly and poetic." James raised a brow. "Ghostly." Florence held her hands up. "I was in a dramatic phase, okay?" Nessie stepped inside slowly. Her eyes softened as she looked around. A sterile space where everything almost ended. But now, it felt smaller, powerless. Just a place, not a prison, not a sentence. James sat in the chair by the window, the same one he had collapsed near. He looked down at his son and whispered, "You saved me, without ever knowing it." Florence tugged on his sleeve. "Do you think if that hadn't happened, we'd all be together now?" James paused. "No." Then he stood up, walked over to Nessie, and touched her cheek. "If I hadn't broken, I never would have learned how to rebuild." Nessie's eyes shimmered. "You rebuilt all of us, James." He shook his head. "You did that. I just finally slowed down enough to see it." As they left the hospital, Florence asked, "Can we take a picture outside?" James laughed. "You just want another viral moment, don't you?" She shrugged. "It's called memory archiving, Dad. Get with the times." They stood in front of the entrance, the same door he had been wheeled out of months ago. Only now, he walked out holding life. Literally, one hand in Nessie's, one daughter dancing in the snow, one son sleeping on his heartbeat, one heart, whole again. It began with silence, not the kind that echoes through lonely walls or sits heavy on your chest. This silence was different. It was the soft hush of snow falling over a world that no longer needed fixing, just cherishing. James stood on the rooftop of the retreat, wrapped in a wool coat, holding a cup of tea Nessie had made. The view stretched wide across the Swiss Alps, white dusting every visible ledge like powdered sugar. Behind him, the glass doors creaked open. Nessie stepped out first, cheeks pink from the chill, her hands now free, because baby Rowan was inside, finally asleep. Florence followed next, in polka-dot pajamas and snow boots, carrying a miniature ukulele. You didn't say there'd be a concert, James teased. Florence strummed one string, out of tune. It's more of a farewell ceremony. Nisi cocked her head. Farewell to what? Florence shrugged. To fear, to the before version of us, to the people we used to be when we didn't know this kind of love was real. James smiled. The sky above them was silver and soft. The snow kept falling, slow and cinematic. He wrapped his arms around his wife's waist. Remember the first night I arrived here? Nessie leaned her head back on his shoulder. Collapsed like a giant pine tree. Florence chimed in. And now you're a tree with branches. He chuckled. A family tree. James stepped forward toward the railing and looked down at the courtyard, the same courtyard he once viewed from a hospital bed. I used to think power was silence, control, efficiency, that if I kept everything in check, no one could hurt me. He turned to them. But then, life knocked the air out of my lungs, and when I woke up, really woke up, I found love standing over me in scrubs and wide eyes. Nessie smiled. You look so confused. I was, he whispered. But now I know. Love isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself with fireworks or fortune. Sometimes, it arrives with apple slices and a stubborn nurse who won't let you check out of your own recovery. Florence raised her ukulele like a sword. To Nurse Nessie. Nessie laughed. Careful, Your Majesty. You're going to wake your royal baby brother. James turned back to the horizon. My daughter taught me how to laugh again. My wife taught me how to feel again. And my son, he reminded me that legacies aren't built from boardrooms but from bedtime stories and snow angels. He looked at Nessie. You weren't just my nurse. You became the pulse I thought I'd lost. He turned to Florence. You weren't just the surprise I never planned for. You became the blueprint of the man I wanted to be. He touched his chest, over where Rowan rested earlier. And you, little one, you arrived just in time to teach me that beginnings never stop. Florence pulled them both into a group hug. Snow landed in her curls. I think this is what forever feels like. Nessie pressed her lips to James's jaw. Soft and cold. No, James whispered. Earned. They stood there for minutes, no need to speak. The snowfall did the talking. The wind hummed their lullaby. Behind them, the lights of the retreat glowed warm and golden. Ahead of them, life waited, unwritten, unrushed, but finally, fully theirs. Narrator, warm, slow voiceover. If this story wrapped around your heart like winter arms around a quiet rooftop, if it reminded you that healing is not always neat, that love is sometimes messy, and that families are often made not found, then type home found in the comments below. And tell me, truly, who in your life helped you rebuild? What was your unexpected beginning? We began with a man who had it all, but couldn't breathe. We end with a man who risked everything and learned how to live. To you watching this, may your wounds become doorways. May your silence find laughter. May your family, no matter how it's formed, remind you that love is still the most extraordinary medicine. From everyone at Love and Twilights, thank you for walking this journey with us. We'll see you in the next story. Until then, good night from the Alps. And good night from this family. My wonderful family, thank you for walking through this journey with me today. If this story touched your heart, let's seal this moment together. Type forever with Love and Twilight in the comments so I know you're part of this family. Don't just watch, engage, connect, and share your voice. Hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs it, and subscribe to stay close with me, Dr. Phillips, on Love and Twilight.